This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in. They'll never let the true facts come about more to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader? Don't remember his name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
Now these people are in very high positions, yeah? Yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 52. I am your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today, we're going to take a trip back to the Crypto Zoo series.
Yeah.
We're going to pick back up.
Yeah. Yeah, our march through the institutions of cryptozoology by doing an episode about every cryptid. But
Yes.
this is actually kind of this is a borderline UFO episode too, because this cryptid is intimately connected with, I guess Bigfoot also, and reptoids. I guess those kind of we've conceived of them as being in the cryptid world. They're monsters, but Mothman is a little bit more UFO-y. Maybe because he flies, so he's an unidentified flying object. By
I was honestly
definition,
surprised when I went through some of the stuff for this. You're definitely a bigger moth head than I am. You're definitely more versed in the lore, but I was not really aware the extent of which there was all this UFO activity around the Mothman phenomenon. I always kind of thought of Mothman a little more like Bigfoot, where he's just buzzing around in the forest and in the woods in West Virginia.
Yeah, he's not even really a moth. That's one of the key things about Mothman, is that there's nothing about him that's really it's a great name, but it's incredibly misleading, because nothing about how Mothman was ever described has anything to do with moths. He's more like an owl, or even a bat. In fact, I think that they were gonna call him Batman, but that was too lame, because of Batman, so they went with Mothman. Because
this is also
on the Batman TV show called the Moth,
Killer Moth
or something,
which is kind of this is certain aspects of this were already in the imagination, and Batman was a very popular TV show when these things started to happen, which was 1966 and 67. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so,
right.
It's
definitely good they didn't call it Batman. That would just be too much, Nick Pizzolatto will be trying to write a movie about him, and talking about how he could kill God.
With enough planning, Mothman could definitely... also, I don't know. It seems also there's an inherent cashing in on the popularity of kind of this superhero kind of comic book sort of a thing that was going on at the time, and really branding it. I think you're right. Mothman is an amazing name. It's so bizarre and evocative. What do you mean a Mothman, But it's not even the only insect that is a superhero with man attached to it. You have Ant-Man, you have why am I blanking on the other
Spider-Man.
big, obviously
he's an arachnid, but that's a bug.
Yeah, Spider-Man, exactly. Spider-Man's an arachnid, Iron Man, iron's just, an object, just a metal. So it's not even sentient. But that was starting to be kind of in the air. I don't know. There was a lot in the air, but I don't know. I never dove too deep into the lore on Mothman. Kind of like Bigfoot. I think this is something that you have dialed into for a very long time. But the more I look into Mothman,
first, moth experience. I guess
not literally the first. I know I probably watched some spooky documentaries somewhere about Mothman, or maybe on the History Channel or something. But it always, you know, it had a particularly kind of goofy aspect to it, even though I guess the things that were happening were like very creepy. And the fact that it happened for like a very finite amount of time in one particular kind of rural region in West Virginia, and then ended after like a gigantic industrial disaster that killed a bunch of people, is intriguing. Very intriguing. Yeah, so and I think that's why true. Mothman resonates and persists.
Well, I think that a big part of it is like the John Keel book, like the Mothman Prophecies, which we're definitely going to spend a lot of time talking about, because that is like that's like the book that like really made Mothman like as such, and like made Mothman explode, because they're like, you know, the evocative name of Mothman, the idea of Mothman like was put front and center, where really like even if you read the book, like a lot of it, like Mothman isn't really a big part of that book so much. He's in it, definitely, but he's not, like, a huge part of the book. It's mostly about, like, UFO, Men in Black stuff, but he played, like, a huge role in Mothman. Like, and I think that he really wove, you know, one way you could think about it, like, you know, from, like, a skeptical POV, is that, like, Mothman, like, people were not, like, super all about, like, after the Silver Bridge collapse, like, that's, like, a horrible like tragedy for a community, like, you know, it was sort of like a national concern, and like or you know it elevated it to like a national level of concern, like it was like a horrifying disaster. Like, so after that, like even if people did see like a UFO or did see Mothman, like, you know, they might be less liable to be like, oh yeah, like I saw Mothman, like call up the cops, you know, and be like, I saw Mothman, you know, like imagine calling the cops at 9/11 and being like,
exactly.
I saw Mothman, you know, like.
Well, funny you should mention that, because there's some allegations that people maybe did see a Mothman flying around the Twin Towers on that morning in 2001.
Well, yeah, I think that's like I watched this documentary a while ago. Actually, I mentioned it in our recent Q&A episode, because the guy I mentioned who wrote the Mothman Prophecies movie, you know, he was talking about how, you know, the one who's like, some people are Mozart, some people are Salieri's, you know. He said that the whole idea that like something you often hear is that Mothman was seen at Chernobyl, you know, before the like accident that happened there. Yes. But according to that guy, he's like, I made that up. Like, I put that in the movie, and now people say that as if that's true.
Okay.
You know, So I think there might be similar
fuzzy information.
Like that.
But we did find a few, and I think even John Keel talks about certain Russian incidents that even happened.
Well, he's
like
all
at the turn of the century.
Like, yeah, he's all about the prophecies. I mean, that's why the book is called The Mothman Prophecies, is because, like, you know, he's very much... But a lot of the prophecies don't come from Mothman or necessarily have to do with Mothman. I guess they do in a way, because the presence of Mothman is related to them, but really they're coming from, like, these android beings that he is talking to secondhand through, like, a contactee who is like channeling them, or like maybe like interacting with them directly, but then sort of like relaying their messages to John Keel without talking to him directly. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned like the superhero thing, because it's like kind of, I haven't really thought of it as being like related to that sort of comic book. I mean, it definitely has a sort of vibe, although I guess maybe I've just always seen it in a crypto context, but or, you know, cryptozoological context. But yeah, I mean, John Keel did, it's funny because he did like sort of write novels and some plays, and he did write like a comic book spoof of superheroes about like a character called like Satyr Man, and it was like some kind of like, you know, very raunchy superhero spoof. So he did do some stuff like that, but I mean, I guess he didn't really have a role in the naming of Mothman. It was the newspaper, but you know, he was really embedded in communicating a lot with the town and during that time. So yeah, it's a I mean, interesting angle on it, but yeah.
Yeah, the superhero thing is interesting, because he even does kind of look like a number of superheroes, both that predated the arrival of Mothman and came afterwards. Like, I think Night Owl from the original Watchmen looks kind of like... Which, I mean, Mothman also gets, like, people say maybe it was like a big owl that people saw.
Yeah, and a lot of people blame owls, or a sandhill crane.
Yeah, sandhill crane.
They say, yeah. He definitely looks more like an owl than a moth. I think that sometimes when people like depict Mothman or imagine him, like the idea that he's a moth sometimes influences like the way that he's like illustrated or drawn, but like really he was, people when he was first sighted, they would just call him like the bird, before they started to adopt Mothman, because and the original title of the Mothman Prophecies actually was Year of the Garuda, which is like some mythical bird in Hindu mythology, Garuda. It's like so he was kind of drawing, that's like John Keel's whole bit, kind of like the idea of these ancient mythologies having something to do with these modern day events, and it's kind of the Jacques Vallée thing, which might be good to talk about a little bit. Like I was doing a little bit of reading of his book Messengers of Deception for this, which has a lot of juicy stuff there about like these UFO cults and things like that. But they kind of have the same bit in a way, where it's about sort of contextualizing the UFO phenomenon that was being witnessed at the time in the 60s in, with these sort of experiences of spirit beings or of, supernatural or, paranormal entities in, historical accounts or in sort of pre-modern or early modern contexts. So yeah, like things like Spring Heel Jack, that's like kind of that's the sort of Forteana that's on the on the line between the sort of Mothman of modernity and like the devil sightings and things like that of pre-modernity, or the demonic or spiritual experiences of pre-modernity. Yeah, Spring Heel Jack is something that comes up, I think, in the Mothman Prophecies. Is sort of a similar issue.
What is Spring Heel Jack?
Spring Heel Jack is like in the Victorian era, there was some like weird dude scene who was like he had like flaming red eyes, and he had like this weird suit on, and he was kind of demonic looking, and the biggest thing that he was known for was like jumping really high, that's why he was called Spring Heel Jack, because he like jumped really high. And like he would just like kind of cause mischief and jump, and I think he attacked a couple of people, but it was like one of those weird things, like similar to like Mothman, where like a community was like beset by this weird entity that like just behaved oddly. There was even like an account in the Mothman Prophecies where there's like some dude like just in a cape, like a silver cape, that is like seen jumping around, which is something that's it's something that comes through a lot in the book, is just how absurd like some of the UFO encounters are, like, which is another, I think, big theme that's also in Jacques Vallée, the idea that some like it's not like in this really tiny box that people put the UFO stuff a lot of the time now, of like, oh, there's grays, they like are there's like these races, the Draco, the Palladians, or the it's really all over the place, and the there's an element of absurdity in a lot of it. It doesn't necessarily follow any kind of like schema that you could think of. There's no real like normative encounter or sighting.
There's definitely there's like no stable taxonomies for basically kind of like categorizing experience, no matter what like Dr. Stephen Greer says, and like it's just all CE5 and don't worry about it. There's really there's a lot of uncertainty and fuzziness around the types of experiences people have, and they vary kind of wildly and not in any kind of discernible pattern usually. I mean, unless you're talking about certain contactee groups that just always seem to like make contact with like 12-foot tall Nordic like Aryan aliens that and tell them white people have like a spark of divine alien DNA in them, and like I'm thinking of the Nine in particular, but where you see a kind of like a projection of a certain worldview or ideology onto the message. It's almost like you're kind of blue beaming yourself in a way.
Yeah, well, the thing about this is that like there's also just a bunch of people who are like lying or psyoping themselves, or like are like unwell, that are in this world, especially like in the world of, this is something that also comes through in the Mothman Prophecies, which is like the preeminent account of like the standard account of or record of the Mothman events, even though it's very much colored by John Keel's kind of style and his approach to these things. It really comes through that, like, the world of ufology is, like, really mired in, like, a lot of, like, drama and, like, the activities of people who are, like, hoaxing for whatever reason. Everyone's really paranoid. Like, there are perhaps, like, some things going on where there's, like, attempts to sabotage, like, their work by powerful groups or shadowy agencies.
MIBs.
And then there's, like, people who are, like, pretending to be... Yeah, exactly. There's, like, the MIBs. Then there's, like... this is an interesting thing about the MIBs. I think we should definitely read some of the MIB stories. But basically, like, I don't know. People probably who are listening to the podcast will probably know, like, that an MIB is... I guess they're kind of, on the line. Like, people haven't reacted to them both ways. But the MIBs aren't just, like, your normal dude, like, or it doesn't seem like a normal, like,
not
FBI
just a normal Fed.
He's not like Agent J or Agent K, basically, at all. Like, they're, like, weird, like, John
there's something vaguely like, inhuman about them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're
aren't there accounts of, like, they're kind of like wires, like, sticking out of, like, their kind of like their pant legs and stuff like that?
Yeah, one story in the Mothman Prophecies, like, has this one guy, like, come to the house and, like, he's like, they're like, would you like anything to eat? And he is like, no, thank you. However, I would like a glass of water in 10 minutes. And then he just starts going, like, like, and he's like, I would like that glass of water now. And, like, they notice that he has, like, this fucking wire sticking out of his pant leg. And it's like, what? It's very...
really creepy.
Yeah, but, like, to sort of go off of that, like, one thing that I did hear, like, proposed on, johnkeel.com, which is the website of some dude who, like, is a John Keel archivist who has, like, a lot of his papers, including a lot of his, like, drafts of stories for the Mothman Prophecies and his personal correspondences and things like that. He sort of talked about this one dude who... let me see if I can actually find the thing. Were some MIBs troubled ufologists? Let me see if I can. Yeah, he says, were some Men in Black troubled ufologists?
Interesting.
This guy's name is deleted, but so this is a transcription of a letter that John Keel wrote. The name of the person concerned is deleted because, like, the author took his name, or redacted his name, or sorry, not the author, but the archivist, the guy who collects these papers, works in John Keel's archives. He took out the name just because he felt like this guy, is probably unwell and it's, like, not constructive to name him. So he says, John Keel goes, Tiny. I am now seriously perturbed. Tiny was a name that was given for, like, one of the MIBs in the Mothman Prophecies. But anyway, he says, I am now seriously perturbed. In November, I received a letter from, name redacted, who announced that he was flying over to England to do research in the British Museum, checking in a manuscript about vampires, name redacted, who was bellyaching about being too hard up to even pay a sub for FSR. He rang me on arrival. I collected him at West Byfleet Station on Saturday, December 10th. I discovered him to be a huge young man, at a guess 240 pounds, and about 6 feet 3 inches, fair-haired, very thin on top. Wore a check shirt and ducks, riding high above his ankles, thick-soled shoes. He had a shabby overcoat and sported a Russian-style fur hat. His speech was a monotonous, emotionless, expressionless, mechanical, one-pitch perpetual motion. He often broke into poetry by Milton and Edgar Allan Poe, reciting it as though he had learnt it computer fashion. He drank the best part of a bottle of my martini and got himself well sloshed, and ranted on about poor misunderstood Hitler, etc., etc.
Okay, see what I mean?
As they might do a cobra, expressed a feeling of repugnance. I thought he was a schizo. On the Sunday just before lunch, he said, and may I look at your FSR files? I declined, lying that they were at the office. After lunch, he upped and went. I saw him off and had one short letter since. He flew back to DeKalb, Illinois, after only 2 or 3 days there. What do you make of that? So this is something that I guess actually this isn't a John Keel letter. It was by Charles Bowen, who published that book, The Humanoids. I guess he wrote this to John Keel, and John Keel had sent him the sort of story. But anyway, this is the addendum written by the guy who wrote this post. The original title of this post was "Were some men in black ufologists with Asperger's?" I called it that because the man I interviewed about Bowen's visitor described him as having Asperger's. But I received some angry responses from readers with Asperger's, objecting to what they saw as a stereotype, so I've changed the title. My interest was not in a diagnosis anyway, but in the evidence that there may be an identification for a classic MIB case. Charles Bowen certainly thought so. So if I offended anyone with Asperger's, I apologize. I didn't mean to imply the man in question is typical. He may indeed be somewhere on the autism spectrum, but clearly he has a number of other problems. So, not to say that, like, you know, there aren't genuine, like, MIB encounters or things like that, but it just, like, adds to the shiftiness and, like, the muddiness that, like, this was also, like, during the Mothman time, like, with John Keel and everyone else there, it was, like, a hub for both, like, hoaxers and pranksters, and also people who were just weird, and who people like in West Virginia, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, like this rural kind of community, like in Appalachia, probably like didn't have much experience with these like UFO types. So like some dude coming in who's like, you know, on the spectrum and being like, have you seen any objects? You know, like, like
you can kind of see that probably everybody seems a little weird to them coming from outside. And
yeah,
that,
like, you know, I could see like if I went to someone's house, like especially like, you know, depending like, you know, like dressing is like sometimes people dress eccentrically. You know, John Keel mentions how there's a story at the beginning of his book where he talks about this story about how, like, the devil is visiting Point Pleasant or something like that. You know, like, the devil was sighted in Point Pleasant. And it was, like, this, you know, tall man with a beard and, like, a suit, you know, banging on doors and things like that, you know, in the community. And how everyone, you know, always remembers this as being the day that, like, the devil visited, you know. But actually, it was him running around like because like his car broke down or something, and he was like looking to use someone's phone, and that was like remembered in the community according to him as being like a visitation by the devil.
Wow.
But you know, so like you can see how like I can imagine like being mistaken like for an MIB like in a certain situation, like, you know, really pale
I'm also
skin, don't make eye contact, you know, like,
have an icy manner, an icy distant manner, and seem like you're up to something. And also I would also wonder, I mean, that line of thinking made me think about, like, what if some people went there and deliberately impersonated being
that definitely
a man in black?
Almost did happen. That it's almost certain that did happen, because there are certain people like Gray Baker, who like were, or Gray Barker that is, who were like known to be like huge hoaxers and like to sort of make prank phone calls and rile people up and things like that. I don't know if they went around like deliberately trying to act like MIB, although that's also possible. Like, it's possible that either people who were in the ufological community who were like trying to just gin up publicity, or just like had like a, you know, a devious mind or whatever, they like were wanting to do it. But maybe also like people who actually were interested in the phenomena, or for whatever reason would, just to kind of color their appearance or to sort of throw people off, might act strangely, or, you know, behave like MIB.
Well,
or have,
also,
like, you know,
how exactly is one, you know, supposed to prove that they're MIB? It's kind of it comes along with the package, right? It's like they're not a federal law enforcement officer who whips out a badge and identifies themselves. Like, by definition, they're shifty and don't tell you who they are, and are very kind of threatening and mysterious. So if you were going to impersonate somebody like that, it actually might even be legal to do that, because, like, if you think about it, it's an interesting legal loophole, because it is technically probably like a felony to impersonate a police officer or an FBI agent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, you know, you'd run a risk there, but if you go there and you just kind of imply that you're like a shady government agent and say like, oh, I can't, you know, I can't tell you that, ma'am, you know, then you're not really saying it, but obviously you're going to look like you're dressing up a certain type of way. And then on top of that, like, what if you did want to fuck with people? You just put like a wire down your pants and like let it stick out and act really bizarre and freak people out. Maybe it throws them off, you know, it makes them feel like they've had this, like, there's a spooky agency watching them. Also, we have to consider, like, what if they are government agents, but they're doing it to fuck with people and psyop people, basically, by sending in kind of operatives that whatever was going on there, because there are a lot of threads of the whole Mothman story that, you know, postulate much like with a lot of other UFO stuff. Like, was this some kind of secret government operation? Was there kind of secret government operation going on of some kind that was mistaken for being a Mothman? And then they sent in people to kind of stir up, like just like Richard Doty, just like stir the, you know, shit code everything, confuse people, make people sussed out, make them feel like they're being watched, and et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, of course, the question of, like, what could it have been if it wasn't Mothman? And also all the UFOs that came along with it during this exact same period that, you know, as we've gone into before, like, there's a possibility that was some kind of classified, like, military hardware or experimental technology that they were fucking around with, like, out in the wilderness, basically. And I don't know. I mean, it could be a lot of things, but you have to juggle all those things when you're thinking about MIB and, like, who the hell are these people?
That's definitely something that people have suggested, that, like, because the Mothman, like, where it was originally sighted was, like, the TNT area, which was like this sort of you know, weird wildlife area around Point Pleasant. Well, at the time of the Mothman stuff that happened, like, you know, around.
It was a decommissioned ammunition, like, storage facility where they had built these like kind of igloo bunkers, these kind of camouflage igloo bunkers everywhere all around this area, and stored it with ammo. And then I guess they found out. Maybe they found out after, I don't know if it was before or after Mothman, where they found out that, like, you know, basically, like, the groundwater had been kind of poisoned by a lot of these munitions.
Yes, they did discover that. Yes.
Yeah, so, and then they turned it into, like, a nature reserve, so it's kind of like this spooky, abandoned military facility kind of area. And there's also, some people have pointed out, I don't know if, like, John Keel really got into it, but apparently there's also, like, a defense logistics agency center that still is in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is, you know, the nexus of Mothman activity. I don't know exactly. I would imagine that's a branch of the Pentagon that basically handles strategic materials, I guess. You know, so maybe munitions, things like that. But, you know, there's all kinds of things, even with, like, MK Ultra, that maybe there was, like, classified military installations out there that were doing some weird shit, and then, I don't know, like, cause Mothman. But there's that military connection that runs through it, right?
Yeah, a lot of people have suggested that, like, yeah, like, it's weird because, like, what they were doing wasn't really, like, something that you'd think would make, like, a, you know, or at least that we know of. It's not something that would make you think, like, there was, like, a mutant or whatever. Like, you know, that some, like, owl, like, drank from, like, a pool of, like, radioactive waste. Like, it was mostly, like, like you said, like, ordnance, you know, or, like, munitions. Yeah. I mean, it did, like, contaminate, like, the environment, but it wasn't, like, mutagenic, or it wasn't, like, the ooze from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something that they had, that we know of, at least.
That we know of.
Like, yeah, and, I mean, there could be, like, they could have maybe repurposed that stuff for, like, other things, and, you know, in some of this Mothman stuff, and some of the sort of weird encounters people have with, like, MIBs or entities, there is, like, a suggestion of, maybe, like, since I think it would be good to read, like, some Mothman, like, tales, courtesy of John Keel. You know, this might be a good one to start with because it gets into one of our, you know, favorite subjects of, like, tunnels, underground stuff. So John Keel writes, in order to cover my actual activities over the Christmas holidays, this is December 27, 67. So I hinted to a number of people by phone that I might be returning to Point Pleasant, West Virginia. On Friday, December 22nd, 1967, a stranger entered the branch of the office of the Athens, Ohio Messenger in Point Pleasant and approached my friend, Miss Mary Heyer. That was, like, someone who worked at the, you know, the newspaper, who often corresponded with John Keel and is mentioned a lot in the book. He identified himself as Jack Brown from Cambridge, Ohio, and said that he was a friend of Gray Barker's and had been investigating UFOs as a hobby for 2 years. Mary was very busy, but permitted him to examine her files of UFO clippings. He told her that he did not believe that Mothman was connected with the UFO phenomenon, and he asked a number of questions about me. He said some derogatory things about me, remarking that I was writing a lot of things that weren't true. Somehow he extracted Connie's name and address from Mary. He also got the McDaniels' phone number from her and called them. These are some of his contacts, in the town. They said that they couldn't see him that night. Linda was just coming home with her baby, which was born December 20th. Jack Brown drove to Middleport and visited Connie that night. Connie and her husband were reportedly very frightened by this. The next night, Brown visited the McDaniels for about 5 hours. Mabel described him as being about 5'7", very slight build, very dark complexion with black piercing eyes and unruly black hair, as if he had a brush out and it was just growing back in. His hands were very unusual, with especially long, tapering fingers. He looked like a Korean or Oriental of some kind, Mabel said. His speech was faltering, his English very poor and difficult to understand. He was dressed in a cheap-looking black suit, and his tie was knotted in an odd, old-fashioned way. He was driving a large white car with a bad muffler. This is typewritten, so some little, smudges here. It made a lot of noise. He carried a very large tape recorder, which he set up on the bar in the McDaniel kitchen. He turned it on and off during the course of the evening. He did not seem to know anything about UFOs and showed no interest whatsoever in the Mothman. But he did tell the McDaniels that he thought Mothman was connected with UFOs. Many friends and neighbors dropped by throughout the evening to look at the new baby, but Brown never once expressed any interest in the child, not even polite interest. Incidentally, the baby was named Daniela Leah Scarberry, apparently because Linda simply liked those names. Another remarkable coincidence. I've never mentioned any names to them like that. Leah was one of the entities that he dealt with, so that's why he finds that so remarkable. Yeah. Brown professed to be great friends with Gray Barker and expressed a high regard for him, but he obviously did not like anything I had written and expressed contempt for me repeatedly. At one point he said he did not know me, but later on he contradicted himself and claimed that he did know me. He acted very vague and detached. His questions lacked intelligence, and his knowledge of the UFO subject was very skimpy. He seemed primarily interested in me and my relationship with Mary. They didn't have an actual relation, they were just friends. But when Tom Connolly arrived for a visit, he shook hands in a strange way, extending his thumb and 2 forefingers for a hand clasp. Later, a reporter from the Columbus, Ohio Dispatch arrived. Cambridge is just outside of Columbus. It quickly became apparent that Brown had never heard of the Dispatch and, in fact, did not know where Cambridge was. Brown's general demeanor made everyone uncomfortable. His inability to converse intelligently and his piercing gaze, almost hypnotic, Mabel said, bothered everyone. The McDaniels tried to be polite to him, as always, but were annoyed by his fixation with me and Mary and his amateurish efforts to pump them about us. Mabel estimated that he was under 30, maybe about 25. He finally departed about 11 p.m. that night after a rather aimless and fruitless attempt at interviewing them. He was obviously far more interested in me than he was in UFOs. He wanted to know how many times I'd been in Point Pleasant this year, how long I had stayed, etc. He expressed surprise that I had not gone running back there after the bridge collapsed. Perhaps he expected to find me there. Spoke to Gray Barker after talking to Mabel, and he denied knowing anyone of Cambridge, Ohio, and said he had never heard of Jack Brown. Spoke to Mary. She said that 2 short, dark-skinned men had come into her office earlier on Friday. They said they were reporters and had heard that Point Pleasant was the site of much UFO activity. She was very busy, but she let them look through her UFO file. They seemed uninterested in it. They asked her if anyone had ever told her to stop writing about UFOs. She said no. They then asked her what she would do if someone did tell her to stop writing on the subject. She said she would tell them to go to hell and would keep on writing. The men never produced any identification. They wore dark overcoats. Later that same day, Jack Brown appeared. He was not wearing any overcoat despite the bitter cold. Mary remarked on his dark, piercing eyes and said she noticed that he would only speak when she was looking directly at him. She was working at the teletype at the time and did not spend much time with him. He said he was Jack Brown and he was researching UFOs. Mary asked if he had ever heard of John Keel, and he said he had thought the world of Keel until 10 minutes before when he picked up a magazine in which I claimed to have seen UFOs. Probably the true one-shot. This angered Mary. And she pointed out that she had been with me many times when I had seen things and that she had seen the same things. After he had visited Connie called Mary very upset. There was something about Brown that had disturbed her very much. Connie's brother, Larry, was equally upset and mentioned that there was... changing pages here. Something funny about the man's ears. Mary thought this over and decided there was something funny about his ears, but she couldn't remember what. Brown also asked Connie and Keith, her husband, if they thought anyone had told Mary to stop writing about UFOs, and what she would do if she were told. He also asked Mary these questions, just as the two men had done earlier. He repeated these questions to the McDaniels. Mary noted that his skin didn't seem right. It seemed as if he had only a layer of skin, or maybe only one layer. I don't know. Maybe it's thin. At the McDaniels, the man acted out of place, as if he didn't know what he was doing. He acted as if he had never interviewed anybody before and didn't quite know how to go about it. He asked Mary if she would take him out to the areas where UFOs had been sighted, and she refused. He later told the McDaniels that he had spent a lot of time around the desolate TNT area in the past couple of days but hadn't seen anything. He tended to express disbelief in the UFO phenomenon generally. Jack Brown's behavior is quite similar to Tiny in the Cape May incident. That's the glass of water wire out of his leg guy. His general demeanor appearance has been described repeatedly in other cases in this file. The conclusion is obvious. Brown also asked Mary if she thought UFOs had anything to do with the collapse of the bridge. She denied this emphatically, as I had instructed her to do. He said Barker had told him that a strange light had been seen over the bridge just before it crumpled into the river. Barker had, in fact, called me the night of the disaster and told me that he had heard a radio interview in which a witness mentioned seeing a flash of light just before the bridge went. Later, it became clear that there was a flash when power cables over the bridge snapped at the time of the collapse. Another source, and it's in parentheses, this is Apple, which is... Apple is an entity, like an alien being. Recently told me, which is being channeled through this person, Jay Parrow. That's her alias. Told me of a rumor that a gray Pontiac was crossing the bridge at that time. The driver was allegedly an Air Force officer on his way to Dayton, Ohio, with a briefcase donating documents in the December 24th affair. This briefcase was supposed to have been handcuffed to his wrist with a chain. Thus far, no such car or occupant has turned up in the salvaging operations there. The rumor is probably static. Mary Heyer called me last night. She had talked to her sister, Faye Carpenter, who was present when Jack Brown visited Connie. Faye was rather perplexed and upset over the incident because she cannot remember anything of the conversation after Brown arrived. According to Faye, Connie noticed the man's car drive up and she reacted violently to it. She told her mother, "Don't let that man in here, I don't like his looks." Faye absolutely cannot remember any of the details of this visit. She says it is like she had been put in some kind of trance. Since Brown's visit, there has been a series of poltergeist-like accidents in Faye's house in Middleport. Pictures have fallen off the wall, dishes have fallen off the shelves, etc. Mary remembered other details of her brief conversation with Brown. She said he asked if John Keel knew about the caves under Point Pleasant. Brown told everyone he would be back in 2 weeks, but he has not turned up again. And there's a special note that he was in shirt sleeves when he visited Faye. He did not seem bothered by the extreme cold. Sleeves. There's a million different ways that one could read, that stuff. Every single, detail could be, taken in a million different ways depending on, how one interprets it. That could be, an ET, or, an ultra-terrestrial or an interdimensional being, an aspect of the phenomenon that Mothman is broadly part of. That could be some CIA guy or something, some kind of
they said he was East Asian, but his name was
They said he seemed
Jack
Oriental
Brown.
or Korean. Yeah, exactly. And he also said he seemed like he had one layer of skin, but who knows, some of the stuff they said about him, you could take it multiple different ways. He might have been just eccentric or a weirdo, and he also mentioned Gray Barker a million times, who we know is kind of a hoaxer, who definitely hoaxed people in the past, and definitely had an acrimonious relationship with John Keel. So
I'm curious about John Keel himself, and basically how when did he get involved with Mothman? Because Mothman happened in 1966 and 67. Was he kind of there on the ground while it was happening, did he kind of show up afterwards?
While it was happening. He was there on the ground while it was happening. Certainly before the bridge. And he was really wrapped up in it. It was interesting because he actually was trying to be a TV writer. He wrote for game shows and stuff. So he wore many hats, but he always was interested in Forteana and UFO stuff. And so he kind of tried to transition to doing this. He got really wrapped up in the Mothman stuff. And he really, people have said, that he made stuff up, which he did do. He, changed names. He attributed things that happen to one person to multiple different people and things like that. Like, we know that stuff can happen. Like, you know, and he definitely has his own take that, like, supervenes on things. Like, you know, when he says, like, the conclusion is obvious. Like, I feel like when he says the conclusion is obvious, like, I don't actually really know. Like, I don't find the conclusion to be obvious at all, but to him it obviously is. Probably that it was, like, an MIB, you know, like, or, you know, some kind of, like, android or something, you know, like, MIB,
but also, like, what was
that, you know,
what was
like,
what was Jack Brown's interest in Mothman specifically? Because he was very into UFOs, but was he a Mothman enthusiast?
Was he a Mothman?
No, I mean, was he a Mothman enthusiast? Like, I mean, was he
Jack Keel, or do you mean Jack Brown or John Keel?
Jack Brown.
Like,
Jack Brown.
Jack Brown. He seemed to, like, be dismissive of Mothman, but the thing about Mothman, like, you know, it was like a saucer thing. Like, there were always UFO sightings going on. So, like, again, like, Mothman and the, like, phenomenon of the Mothman was tied to, like, the UFO sightings and, like, the other beings and the MIBs that were being seen. Like, like, the way that people understood Mothman, like, had to do with that. He mentioned it multiple times and was like... like, kind of contradicting himself around it. But, yeah, like, in terms of, like, maybe to give some more context, like,
like, can I think... like, beliefs. Well, his beliefs, and also just, like, what... Maybe we can just go over real quickly, like, the core of, like, what actually happened in 1966 and 67 that drew all these people in. Well, let's read something from the Mothman Prophecies, like, you know, because these are the stories, these are the elemental Mothman stories. Okay.
We can read about, like, one of the encounters.
The stories of people that saw the Mothman during this era. I guess, who were the first? Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallet? In November 15th, 1966.
Yeah, it was Mary Mallet, right. Yeah, this is what John Keel has to say about that. You know, he's trying to... First, he sets up the TNT area and talks about, you know, what we're talking about, you know, while it witnessed many biological events over the years, it had no reputation as a haunted place. The local police cruise through it every evening, occasionally flashing their lights into a darkened car. Everyone raised in the area knows every corner of the place. Sportsmen clubs built an archery range and a picnic area there. At 11:30 p.m. on the night of November 15th, 1966, two young couples from Point Pleasant, Mr. and Mrs. Roger Scarberry and Mr. and Mrs. Steve Mallet, were driving to the TNT area in the Scarberry's 1957 Chevy. They were looking for friends, but no one seemed to be out that night. All the twisting back roads were deserted. The few homes scattered among the igloos were dark. Roger, then a strapping blonde 18-year-old, was driving. They aimlessly made the circuit of the roads around the igloos, returning to the old generator plant near the unlocked gate. As they pulled alongside the plant, Linda Scarberry gasped. They all looked into the blackness and saw two bright red circles. They were about 2 inches in diameter and 6 inches apart. Roger slammed on his brakes. "What is it?" Mary Mallet, a strikingly attractive brunette. I love, like, this is, like, John Keel stuff. Like, you gotta talk about how he's strikingly attractive. Cried from the back seat. The lights bobbed away from the building, and the startled foursome saw that they were attached to some huge animal. "It was shaped like a man, but bigger," Roger said. "Maybe 6.5 or 7 feet tall. It had big wings folded against its back. But it was those eyes that got us," Linda declared. "It had 2 big eyes like automobile reflectors. They were hypnotic," Roger continued. "For a minute we could only stare at it. I couldn't take my eyes off it. It was grayish in color and walked on sturdy man-like legs. It turned slowly and shuffled toward the door of the generator plant, which was ajar and hanging off its hinges. "Let's get out of here," Steve yelled. Roger stepped on the gas and they shot through the gates and spun onto the exit road and headed for Route 62. Suddenly they saw it, or another one like it, standing on a small hill near the road. As they hurtled past it, it spread its bat-like wings and took off straight up into the air. "My God, it's following us," the couple in the backseat cried. Roger swung onto 62 on 2 wheels. "They were doing 100 miles per hour, Roger said. We were doing 100 miles an hour, Roger said. "And that bird kept right up with us. It wasn't even flapping its wings. I could hear it making a sound," Mrs. Mallet added. "It squeaked like a big mouse. It followed us right to the city limits," Roger went on. "Funny thing, we noticed a dead dog by the side of the road there. A big dog. When we came back a few minutes later, the dog was gone." Panic-stricken, the red eyes still burning in their minds, they went directly to the Mason County Courthouse, charged with the sheriff's office, and blurted out their story to Deputy Millard Halstead. "I've known these kids all their lives," Halstead told me later. "They'd never been in any trouble, and they were really scared that night. I took them seriously." He hopped into a patrol car and followed Roger's car back to the TNT area. At the edge of town, they looked for the dog's body. It was gone. Back at the power plant, there was no sign of the red-eyed specter. Halstead switched on his police radio, and a very loud signal blasted out of the speaker, drowning out the voice of the police dispatcher in Point Pleasant. It was a loud garble, like a record or tape recording being played at very high speed. Deputy Halstead, an experienced cop, looked taken aback but said nothing. He switched the radio off quickly and peered uncomfortably into the darkness, reluctant to really search the old building, but he was convinced. The next morning, Sheriff George Johnson called a press conference. Miss Mary Hires sent the story out on the AP Wire that evening, and the bird was a chief topic at supper tables at the Ohio Valley. This is the Mothman thing. Some anonymous copy editor gave it a name, spun off from the Batman comic character who was in the subject of a popular TV series. He tagged the creature Mothman. So there you go, your prototypical
right
Mothman tale,
Yeah. I find it so the sheriff turned on the radio and there was like a cacophonous interference happening and he's had to switch it off.
Yes, he's switching on his police radio and allows him to blast out of it. Yeah.
I'm just gonna throw out it might refer back to this a couple times, but it sounds very Operation Wandering Soul. Perhaps radio interference, spooking people out with audio. This is in 1960. This is near the end of 1966. So just as the Vietnam War is escalating, Mothman appears.
Yes.
Which I'm just putting a note on that. So that's that was the first big sighting, and then there were a flurry of sightings in the days after that, right?
Yeah, there were a number of them. Yeah, some other dude, Bennett, I think, dude, or was it a woman? It was Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Wamsley and Mrs. Marcella Bennett and her baby daughter Tina. They saw Mothman. And it wasn't an airplane. We couldn't figure out what it was, Mrs. Bennett said. She and the Wamsleys were probably the only people in the crowd who were not looking for the red-eyed creature. They were on their way to visit the Ralph Thomases, who lived in a neat bungalow back among the igloos. Those bunkers we mentioned. Mr. Thomas was a superintendent of the Trojan U.S. operations there. His wife, Virginia, was a slender gentlewoman blessed or cursed with second sight. She had accurately predicted numerous accidents and local events over the years. She was careful not to seek attention, and only her friends knew of her remarkable abilities. Deeply religious, she went to church almost every evening, and on this night, both she and her husband were out. The Wamsleys and Mrs. Bennett found only 3 of the Thomas children, Ricky, Connie, and Vicky, at home. After exchanging a few words with the youngsters, they headed back to their car. Off in the distance, they could hear some trigger-happy hero firing a rifle around the power plant. Suddenly, a figure stirred in the darkness behind the parked car. It seemed as if it had been lying down, Mrs. Bennett told me. It rose up slowly from the ground, a big gray thing, bigger than a man, with terrible glowing red eyes. Mrs. Bennett uttered a little cry, so horrified she dropped the small baby in her arms. The child began to cry, more insulted than hurt, I hope, but her mother couldn't move to pick her up again. She stood transfixed, hypnotized by the blazing red circles on top of the towering headless creature. Its great wings unfolded slowly behind its back. Raymond Wamsley grabbed the paralyzed woman and the child, and they all ran back into the house, slammed the door, and bolted it. There was a sound on the porch, and the 2 red eyes peered in through a window. The woman and children became hysterical, while Wamsley frantically phoned the police. It was 9 p.m. Hundreds of people, many of them armed to the teeth, were less than a mile away and would not know about the episode until they read it in the local papers the following evening. So, some more Mothly stuff.
So just those eyes, it all seems to focus on the eyes, and
the eyes are a big deal for sure.
They have some kind of highly traumatic, hypnotic, traumatic, really engrossing effect.
They're often described as hypnotic, just like the eyes of MIBs are described as being similar effect, or the lights of UFOs in general are often described as that. Two firemen saw it, and they said it was definitely a bird, but it was huge. We'd never seen anything like it. The idea that it was a moth is definitely not something that is 100% consistent with what everyone says. He was much more bat-like or bird-like than moth-like. What people saw.
Yeah, he was really more like a Birdman to go with Hollywood again, kind of literally made a movie.
Yeah, he was more like Birdman.
A Birdman. But Mothman, it just captures something so off about. It's creepier. A man-sized moth is, I think, inherently more bizarre and terrifying than a man-sized bird.
Yeah, for sure, of course, because birds do get pretty big. I mean, ostriches are man-sized birds. You wouldn't want to see a man-sized moth at all.
No.
Or, insects, I think. Yeah,
or a man-sized cockroach, a man-sized spider, like none of it. No.
Although there is something iconic about like the silhouette of Mothman, you know, which I guess, you know, moths, they kind of have like, they don't really have a distinct head. They sort of do, but I guess it is kind of mothy.
They don't really have a neck.
More owly.
Yeah, they don't really have a neck. Kind of like owls too.
They don't have a neck. This is one of the takes on what Mothman was that I guess John Keel sort of believed in. So another thing about the Mothman prophecies is that, so, okay, I'm just going to come out and say that saw when I was looking around, you know, I Googled something like Mothman, like MK Ultra or something, you know, to try to find something about the MK angle. First thing that comes up is a tweet from a big influencer, Matt Christman. So he shared an article, I guess, about a sort of outbreak of like hallucinations that happened in a French town. That had previously been attributed to, or, you know, I guess really is still attributed by most people to,
they spiked the water with LSD.
Poisoning. That was the claim that one guy made. I almost don't believe that really is true, but, like, that is more tendably true than Matt Christman's take, because what he said was, so based on this thing, the Pont Saint-Esprit poisoning, you know, there's some dude who came out and said, like, this case of, like, ergot poisoning, you know, that was really the CIA spiking the bread with LSD or something, you know, but that's definitely disputed. But, you know, I wouldn't put it past the CIA to do something like that, but I don't really know if I even buy that. But what I definitely don't buy is Matt Christman retweeting this and saying, "This bolsters my theory that the Mothman paranormal flap in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, parentheses 1966 and 1967, was an MK Ultra operation." So the bare idea that it was an MK Ultra operation, like, I could see an element of that. But the idea that these people were on LSD, I do not think is true.
Yeah,
I don't think that was the issue. Like, so there's nothing to do with these two things. Like, it's just completely confusing and, like, obfuscation of, like, everything about this. And shows, like, no knowledge of it whatsoever. Like,
that
you know,
is not a very apt conflation of those two things. Because I do believe, I've read about the French town and everything. It happened in 1951, so, like, right before MK Ultra really started. But anyways, like, I mean, I think the idea that, like, that was something that happened over the I don't know, the course of like a week or two, I think, that whole French thing.
And what people experienced, the hallucinations they had were consistent with poisoning, with some psychedelic material.
Exactly.
You know, like,
whereas this, like, what kind of drug could you give people in like a water supply or something for like almost 2 years, and then, like, I don't know, take it away? Like, that just doesn't
and then everything's
really add
normal
up.
Except they see, like, you know,
Mothman.
these weird characters and have conversations with them, and, like, they all, it doesn't make any sense. Like it's literally completely
maybe he
nonsense.
thinks, you know, like, like what the you know, the Fatima sighting or something was like a collective delusion. I've heard that argument before, you know, from God, what was that in the Portugal, in like the 1910s,
I don't know if it's
where these
Portugal,
girls,
but actually John Keel mentions that as being, like, you know, a Mothman type thing, you know,
God.
or like he also mentions like incidents of mass hallucination, like in, you know, medieval times, like that were attributed to ergot poisoning. So that's like an old thing where people have like outbreaks of madness or mass hallucinations, and often, like, one explanation that's given to those things is that they were poisoned by ergot. In fact, that's even an explanation that people have for Salem sometimes, is that it was poisoning in the same way, but like psychedelic fungus and bread or something like that.
like,
you know?
they were all microdosing and didn't know it.
That's like but, like, you know, whatever you think about that, like, you know, that doesn't have any bearing on this, and it doesn't bolster anything. And
It's
the fact
too
that
specific.
he tweeted this makes me think that Mothman's real, because like, this is the best. That's the best evidence for Mothman being an ultra-terrestrial being, is that Matt Christman made this nonsensical tweet about how it was an MK Ultra operation. Like, that made it me, like, much more suspicious of the idea that it was an MK Ultra operation.
Hard to argue
I mean, I'm being a bit facetious, but, you know, like...
But that happens all the time. Like, the kind of, there's a kind of, like, like a tendency of, like, kind of pointing out something horrible the CIA did, but then kind of, like, misapprehending it in a certain way and then applying it to, like, logically you know, unlocking the meaning of, like, another event, that another big kind of conspiracy event that happened that kind of, like, wraps it all up nicely in a bow, and it's still like, the CIA is bad, but trying to think of, like, other examples where people have done, I think that a lot of around, like, the JFK assassination and stuff, like, I mean, you could even see it with, like, the Mark Fisher shit that we talked about, like, with acid communism. It's like that's a thing. It's like, oh, like, they were doing MK Ultra, like, saying that, okay, for example, like, Charles Manson was, like, some kind of CIA agent, and they used him to, like, destroy the 60s, but still believing that the entire culture, that counterculture, like, leading up to it and all the LSD stuff was, like, legit until, like, Charles Manson came in and, like, Altamont happened, and it was like history had changed overnight. You know, something is ending. Yeah, exactly. You know, and so then
it's almost as if this free love. It's like the summer.
It leaves
of love
everything.
It's as if we are entering the 70s.
It's like it's the day that the music died in a way. It leaves this whole field kind of uninterrogated of stuff that you could kind of, you know, well, if this is true, then let's work backwards from that. Like, how deep does the kind of manipulate, how deep did the op go? And I think you really do have to ask yourself that with Mothman. Like, how deep did this op go? Because I'm not saying that it wasn't an op, but it would have to be a much more like complicated op than just dosing people with LSD. It'd have to be on a whole nother level of, like, weird magnitude. With, I mean, maybe there's other the kind of explanations as well, but I feel like the combination of, it's like the Mothman element and the UFO element happening simultaneously, and then both disappearing after a huge disaster of the Silver Bridge collapsing, that's too many weird specific coincidences for it to be, like, the product of, like, a kind of mass hallucination, or just be something, or just be like a bird. I'm really not sold on the kind of, like, owl / crane theory. Maybe a few people saw something that they thought was liminally, like, I could see maybe the way an owl looks. You know how sometimes their eyes kind of, like, they light up a little bit.
Eye shine. Eye shine. Night vision, so, like, if you on them,
so you could see that, a big ass owl or something. Maybe there's even a mutant owl from all those chemicals they dumped. But I still feel like there were too many sightings for it to have just been, like, a big, like, I won't say 0% chance it wasn't a big owl that was maybe a mutant freak or something, but I don't know, like, how could it fly like 100 miles per hour or something, like, in chasing a car?
Exactly.
How could it traumatize you with its, like, glowing red eyes? Like, you know, these things.
Yeah, it's true. It does not really make sense. No, it does not. That does not comport with an owl.
Why does it have psychic powers?
Like, so that's another thing. Like, the stuff, I mean, as we saw from that thing about Jack Brown, like, that was the kind of thing, I mean, it's definitely less wild than the Mothman stories, but that kind of stuff was part of the Mothman phenomenon. So I don't actually think that necessarily did stop, but prophecies were a part of it, which I think we should get into, like, in a moment. But this was an interesting take, just as a taste of what that is. You know, John Keel, during the time of Mothman, was in contact with these contactees. So he was a contactee of contactees. He was a second-degree contactee who was having these conversations with these beings who purported to be from other worlds, realities, etc., like another advanced race of some kind, you know, and basically they were involved in this kind of struggle, like, with some kind of, like, enemy, so this is what he said. This is September 8th, September 28th, 1967, is one of his little typewritten notes. A long-distance call from West Virginia informed me that Linda Scarberry woke up this morning with one eye swollen shut. Linda is pregnant. Connie Carpenter, who was also pregnant, has been suffering from fainting spells and blackouts down there. Mrs. Thomas, the Point Pleasant visionary, has had some new visions indicating that Mothman is very dangerous. She also says she has seen an army of dark-skinned people causing some kind of riot around the Marietta plant. This is the first time.
Like,
I wonder.
like
Interesting.
Helter Skelter labor war.
That's the whole thing. But anyway, this is the first time she has had a totally negative vision of the situation, and she is scared. A few weeks ago, Doris Lilly of Point Pleasant woke in the middle of the night and saw a man in a checkered shirt standing over her bed. No details as yet. Dan Drayson returned from West Virginia on Monday and is trying to make plans go down again next week. I may go with him. Looks like things are happening there again. In an attempt to learn more about what is going on, I asked Jay to invite Apple to her house tonight. At 11 p.m., I talked with him for over an hour on the phone. He is still not quite himself. He warned me, so he talked to this entity over the phone, so I don't know, but anyway. He warned me not to go to West Virginia, that it would be dangerous for me. He said that the way that he writes it is in quotation marks in all caps with a space between moth and man, so it's just like very great. Just feel like
Mothman.
He said that the Mothman is some type of creature from under the earth, which has been dormant for centuries, and is now being brought up by the enemy. They are systematically taking over all of West Virginia. He said that these creatures thrive on human blood. Their occasional appearance over the centuries gave rise to our vampire legends. Like vampires, they are afraid of the cross, particularly crosses made of gold. We discussed a great many things, and it was a fruitful conversation. Apple told me all of the aliens are disturbed by light beams, and that flashlights, etc. should not be used to signal UFOs. Some of the UFOs react with hostility when hit by beams of light. Since light is a form of concentrated energy, it is probable that this energy disrupts the composition of both the UFOs and the aliens. I asked about the use of ultrasonic sounds. I suggested that we might mount a series of high-frequency sirens in areas inundated by the aliens. Apple said this might be effective, but the aliens would take immediate countermeasures and destroy such sirens and their builders. Apple said that his people had only a token force in West Virginia, at a place called Rodney's Point, and they could not protect me if I went down there. We discussed the hereditary aspects at length. He said that 1 person out of 20 is an indirect descendant, and that 1 person out of every 100 is a direct descendant. My mind was examined on June 12th while I was sleeping, he said. He thinks that I might be a direct descendant, but further tests will be necessary. I volunteered for the test, but asked that I be permitted to remain conscious and be permitted to retain memory of the experience. He said Jay and I should obtain shortwave receivers and tune them to the low end of the dial, around 90.
So he's of a Mothman bloodline?
He's of an alien bloodline.
Bloodline, okay.
He even says, there's actually a little bit more of this. He says, getting back to the Mothmen, he said that they were controlled by the enemy and had been forced to remain underground until recently because of a breathing problem. They are conducting experiments similar to those being carried out by his people, biological tests, etc. He said that the enemy would soon take over West Virginia and other states. It seems that the conflict is entering new and serious stages. Apple says that it will break into the open within the next 3 years. New York and many other cities may be totally destroyed in this war. He said that a big blackout will occur sometimes around Christmas this year. The energy people, he said, work mostly around military bases, the Pentagon, etc. They freeze our people and enter such places at will. Jay's parents are frequently frozen these days. That is, they are suddenly placed in a suspended state. For example, Agar, one of the other entities, might come to visit Jay while her parents are home. As soon as Agar enters the apartment, her parents are transfixed and oblivious to what is going on. When Agar leaves, the parents become unfrozen and continue with whatever acts and talk they were carrying out before they were frozen, totally oblivious to the interruption. There doesn't seem to be any way in which we mortals can combat these incredible techniques. So John Keel did seem to really buy into this stuff, and like that's like the whole... That gives you a taste of the whole scope of the Mothman prophecies, because there's like a lot going on. Like it's an interstellar war. New York is going to be destroyed.
There's white hats
probably.
and black hats. Yeah, that's there. Yeah, and it is all happening in this one place over the course of like a year and a half or two, and I mean, yeah. We can dive more into that. Do you want to take a break right now? We're at 103.
Yeah, sounds good.
And then we can get more into. Maybe, just like the overlap. He's at the river's edge. He's past the rainbow bridge. He's not inside your head. He wants to be your friend. I am the great Mothman. Flying till the end. The Mothman is your friend. Come on, take my hand. I am the great I wanted to circle back real quick to the idea of like the Men in Black around all this, because according to John Keel, they were putzing around during the Mothman UFO period, like in, I guess, 1967. There was one little anecdote here that like jumped out at me about one kind of figure that I think showed up a little bit before Jack Brown, but he writes here.
Well, it was before Silver Bridge. It was before Jack Brown.
Yeah, this is in May 1967, so it's kind of like at the climactic, late end of the Mothman period and the UFO period. But John Keel writes, quote, "Did you ever hear of anyone, especially an Air Force officer, trying to drink Jell-O?" Mrs. Ralph Butler of Owatonna, Minnesota asked. "Well, that's what he did. He acted like he had never seen any before. He picked up the bowl and tried to drink it. I had to show him how to eat it with a spoon." Mrs. Butler was describing the man who had visited her in May 1967 following a flurry of UFO sightings in Owatonna. He said he was Major Richard French of the U.S. Air Force, although he was dressed in civilian clothes and was driving a white Mustang. His neat gray suit and everything else he was wearing appeared to be brand new. Even the soles of his shoes were unscuffed, unwalked upon. He was about 5 feet 9 inches tall, with an olive complexion and a pointed face. His hair was dark and very long, too long for an Air Force officer, Mrs. Butler thought. Unlike Jack Brown, Major French was a fluent conversationalist and seemed perfectly normal until he complained about his stomach bothering him. When Mrs. Butler offered him the Jell-O, she suspected for the first time that something was out of kilter. Richard French was an imposter, one of the many wandering around the United States in 1967. For years, these characters had caused acute paranoia among the flying saucer enthusiasts, convincing them that the Air Force was investigating them, silencing witnesses, and indulging in all kinds of unsavory activities, including murder. When I first began collecting such reports, I was naturally suspicious of the people making such reports. It all seemed like a massive put-on. But gradually it became apparent that the same minute details were turning up in widely separated cases, and none of these details had been published anywhere, not even in the little newsletters of the UFO cultists. There was somebody out there, all right. A few, like Richard French, almost pulled off their capers without drawing attention to themselves. But in nearly every case, there was always some small error, some slip of dress or behavior which the witnesses were usually willing to overlook, but which stood out like signal flares to me. They often arrived in old model cars which were as shiny and well kept as brand new vehicles. Sometimes they slipped up in their dress, wearing clothes that were out of fashion or, even more perturbing, would not come into fashion until years later. Those who posed as military officers obviously had no knowledge of military procedure or basic military jargon. If they had occasion to pull out a wallet or notebook, it would be brand new. Although most men carry beat-up old wallets and notebooks quickly gain a worn look. Finally, like the fairies of old, they often collected souvenirs from the witnesses, delightedly walking away with an old magazine, pen, or other small expendable object. What troubled me most was the fact that these mystery men and women often matched the descriptions given to me by contactees who claimed to have seen a UFO land and had glimpsed or conversed with their pilots with either pointed features or oriental countenances, dusky skin, parentheses, not negroid, and unusually long fingers. So
yeah, I feel like there is like a little bit of like racial paranoia around like the MIBs and like just this stuff in general. Like
their swarthiness always gets commented upon.
I remember the take on like the Betty and Barney Hill abduction that like that was some kind of like repressed manifestation of like their angst from being in an interracial relationship. Which, like, I don't think that's, like, necessarily the case, but, I do feel like in this stuff, like, especially since, like, it's around the same time as, like, Martin Luther King and everything, I actually read, like, on the John Keel website, like, that there was, like, he, I read some of his correspondences with his girlfriend, or, his one-time girlfriend, and it was Lynn Cato. A crazy thing about, and she was a black woman, and who actually worked at the Library of Congress, and they met because she was assembling, like, a bibliography about UFOs. It's a crazy, she actually wrote to him, like, briefly about, like, the riots following the death of MLK. She, like, towards the end of their relationship, she wrote, like, events in Washington from Friday to Monday have for me a dreamlike quality. That is, it was hard to grasp the reality of what was occurring. Much of the city is fully as devastated as if bombs had been dropped during a war, and it was a war situation of sorts. As things were organized, it seemed there was a vanguard that went along smashing windows. Then the people in the neighborhood moved in and looted. Efforts were concentrated on men's haberdasheries. Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah. There's nothing new under the sun. Efforts were concentrated on men's haberdasheries, TVs, and appliance stores, food stores, and jewelers. Liquor stores, of course, were a prime target, even in areas that were otherwise rather quiet. My own immediate neighborhood was completely untouched, including liquor stores, for several reasons, I think. Troops called in, had their headquarters at the old soldiers' home, which is south of us. Riot mobs would have had to pass them to get as far north as I live. Then, too, even if windows or stores had been broken, people in the neighborhood would not have been disposed to move in and take advantage of the situation. So yeah, she goes on and she talks about how it wasn't a friend of hers said it wasn't even as bad in Casablanca in '55 when there was widespread undercover guerrilla warfare because she had spent some time in the Middle East. Oh wow! Yeah, and I guess this woman also was a psychic. She said, for example, that in the day of the assassination, she was at the beauty parlor under the dryer with her head tilted slightly down because she was drinking Matracol. Then she said that quite plainly she saw several pairs of bloody men's feet shuffling towards her. She said she was so surprised that she jumped quite violently and spilled the Matracol. I don't know what that is. Metracol? But anyway, the operator came running over thinking she had perhaps received a shock from the dryer. Yeah, then he goes into a little bit, the idea of having people of color in NICAP, the National Investigation Committee of Aerial Phenomena, basically a UFO organization. I don't know what the acronym is. National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomena. That's what it's called. But anyway, apparently, someone suggested that there should be black people admitted to this informal UFO organization, but. I think it was Isabel Davis. Yeah, Isabel Davis said that she was violently opposed to the idea of adding a black person to the staff. And
that's interesting. You don't always think about that in terms of UFO groups in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But a lot of them probably would have been exclusively white. Maybe it just ended up demographically being that way because there are people in the suburbs or whatever, but at the same time how many of and then of course how could that not color their perception of the UFOs and their expectations and their fears and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, something crazy that, at least interesting that I discovered, on this reread of the Mothman Prophecies that would not have stuck at me before because I didn't even know who this guy was before doing this podcast. If you have listened to our episodes on Soviet psychic discoveries and our episode on Bigfoot, you'll recognize Ivan T. Sanderson as the guy who wrote the insane racist intro to New Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain.
The middle, east, west, central, west.
Yes, and also the guy who said that, the fate of the world depends on, whether the U.S. or the Soviets discover the Yeti first, and, if not, all the world religions will be rocked to the core, and, we'll all be at the mercy of the Soviets if they have a Yeti in their possession. But that guy is, John Keel's best friend. He's in the Mothman Prophecies a lot. He's mentioned the Mothman Prophecies a lot, and he's they correspond together. They were actually going to write a book together called Abominable Space Beings. It fell apart because there were some stylistic clashes, but it was kind of a takeoff of Abominable Snowman. There's there actually was drama between, because he was dating this black woman, Lynn Cato, and there was actually drama between Ivan Sanderson and John Keel and this woman because I guess there was a National Enquirer piece, which, if you remember, that was kind of involved in some of the Bigfoot investigations, and that magazine was, rather. And there was a National Enquirer piece, I guess, that sort of said that, Ivan Sanderson and John Keel were going to quit ufology because they'd been intimidated too much by the men in black. And Ivan T. Sanderson was convinced that, Lynn had blabbed to some reporter, and that, and he apparently was super paranoid and was always they're out to get me, blah, 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 my phone's tapped, and yeah, he has there's a hilarious letter that he wrote to John Keel where he's John, like my friend, I don't know if I can handle living in New York anymore. Like, I've been a New Yorker, if you will, for 25 years, but the city's getting a little bit too, he had some concerns, yeah.
Oh, I
but,
see. It's like it's changing the types of people that live here.
Yeah, the types of people that live here are changing. Yeah, he definitely.
It's also interesting that the other National Enquirer kind of connection is like the other book that we did, like the Soviet breakthroughs in like parapsychology, was written by two National Enquirer journalists who got access to go to the Soviet Union in like 1977.
Yeah, interesting. I guess that they were like big into this stuff. But yeah, he has a bunch of remarks in his letters to John Keel where he's just like, I saw two men of, let's say, tropical African extraction or whatever. He's very he's quite the racist. But anyway, they were very close, and he was surprisingly like into UFOs as well. He kind of portrays himself as being this sort of scientific biology focused guy, but he was into UFOs. There's one really funny letter where not to say that not to cast aspersions on those who search for the abominable snowman, but it was kind of a funny juxtaposition because he's talking about this drama that there was in the ufology community and the drama between him and John Keel's girlfriend, and he said something like, I hope that we can return to discussing sensible things such as snake charming and abominable snowmen. It's just like, but I don't think he had a hint of irony about it at all. I think that he actually was serious. Like, we should return to sensible subjects like the abominable snowmen.
Exactly.
But,
just tangent, I just found a juicy little anecdote in Keel's book that kind of links up with maybe this kind of a racial anxiety thing that has to do with Vietnam. And this is interesting, and maybe it'll tie into other stuff. But he writes, there are shaggy bird stories by the pound. A businessman in Arlington, Virginia, wrote to me recently describing an experience he and three friends had in the winter of 1968-69. They were at a farm near Haymarket when they heard a strange rushing sound near a small lake. Intrigued, they set out with flashlights and a couple of dogs to investigate. Suddenly, the dogs howled, turned tail, and ran. There, standing by a tree, was a huge dark shadow between 8 and 12 feet tall. The quartet scurried back to their car, turned on their lights, and swung toward the shadow. All we saw, he reported, was this huge thing with large red-orange eyeballs and wing-like arms. We couldn't get out of there fast enough. We even have a naked woman with wings in our collection. Here we go. The case was investigated by Don Worley, an experienced student of the unknown, who interviewed the witness in depth. He is a reliable observer, Worley notes, and he swears that this event is well beyond the capacity of his imagination. Earl Morrison, the witness, was serving as a private first class in the Marine Corps in Vietnam in the summer of 1969. He and two buddies were sitting on top of a bunker near Da Nang on a warm summer evening. All of a sudden, I don't know why, we all three looked out there in the sky. I guess this is his quote. We all three looked out there in the sky, and we saw this figure coming toward us. It had a kind of glow, and we couldn't make out what it was at first. It started coming toward us, real slowly. All of a sudden, we saw what looked like wings, like a bat's, only it was gigantic compared to what a regular bat would be. After it got close enough so we could see what it looked like a woman, a naked woman. She was black. Her skin was black, her body was black, the wings were black, everything was black. But it glowed. It glowed in the night, kind of a greenish cast to it. There was a glow on her and around her. Everything glowed. Looked like she glowed and threw off a radiance. We saw her arms toward the wings, and they looked like regular molded arms, each with a hand and fingers and everything, but they had the skin from the wings going over them. And when she flapped her wings, there was no noise at first. It looked like her arms didn't have any bones in them because they were limber, just like a bat. She started going over us, and we still didn't hear anything. She was right above us, and when she got over the top of our heads, she was maybe 6 or 7 feet up. We couldn't do anything. We didn't know what to do. We just froze. We watched what was going over because we couldn't believe our eyes. So we watched her go straight over the top of us, and she still hadn't made any noise flapping her wings. She blotted out the moon once. That's how close she was to us. As we watched her, she got about 10 feet or so away from us. We started hearing her wings flap. And it sounded, like regular wings flapping. And she just started flying off, and we watched her for quite a while. The total time when we first saw her and could almost define her until we lost sight of her and were unable to define her was between 3 and 4 minutes. Vietnam had a big UFO wave in 1968 and 69, which included an epidemic of phantom helicopters. On several occasions, the military forces on both sides fired at the objects without effect. Private First Class Morrison's account stands as one of the best close-up sightings of a winged entity. Yeah, so not only were there rock ape Bigfoot creatures on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but I guess they had a big UFO wave in 68 and 69, and that does line up pretty well with a certain hotshot young psyop lieutenant going over there, starting Operation Wandering Soul, the Phoenix program, doing like auditory psyops out of helicopters. But I wonder, like the phantom helicopter thing, I'm not super familiar with that, nor did I hear that Vietnam had a ton of UFOs, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that, for one, I think it definitely makes sense that, like, American, like, GIs would see UFOs in Vietnam, and, like, but I also think the PSYOP component is super interesting. Like, it really lines up with, like, Jacques Vallée wrote a book called Messengers of Deception. I mean, he really put this whole idea out, like, in a bunch of his different books. And like I said, like, he's kind of on a similar wavelength as John Keel. But the interesting thing about his book, Messengers of Deception, is that he really talks about kind of something that we've floated a little bit before about how, like, there's an interest by certain parties, like, their identity, like, kind of being vague in sort of controlling the UFO phenomena. Like, in that book, he talks a lot about, you know, UFO cults and how, like, they might be used or they might be infiltrated or things like that. There's even this one guy he talks to who's like a member of the John Birch Society, and he's all about like starting a political party to get like someone who's a contactee like into the White House. Yeah, like he actually, there's one part in the book where he talks with Timothy Leary, and Timothy Leary says some weird things about like how he's like no longer human or whatever. Like you know, let me see if I can find that part. It's not like directly relevant to the manipulation hypothesis, but he does talk about it shortly thereafter, so it might dovetail into it. He says, you know, he went down to listen to the tapes that Leary made in jail. They weren't meant to be released, but the prison psychologist undertaken a study of Leary, and the whole thing had gotten out of hand. The tapes belonged to the state, the psychiatrist, or to Leary. There was a complicated legal battle. The tapes got out. We were going to hear them as soon as everyone was there. So he gathered there with some people who had driven from San Francisco, Berkeley, Stanford. Others live in the woods nearby, you know. There are lots of long-legged, tanned California girls who are knocking the pipe out of a physicist's mouth. You know, one physicist had done research on Uri Geller, who was there. There was enough scientific talent in the room to send a rocket to Pluto. He says, Leary's voice coming out of the tape recorder was calm as he discussed his beliefs with the prison psychiatrist. His argumentation was as sure as if he had been back at Harvard, administering a PhD qualifying exam in the psychology department. He started that every living entity had a generic purpose, and that the problem before us now was the future of the human race. He implied that man was fast approaching the end of his rope, that evolution was ready to make a new jump toward a higher form of life, and that a superior intelligence had conceived the blueprint for us on Earth. The central nervous system was its gift to us, a piece of equipment to explore and use in order to establish communication with our maker. The interviewer asked if this wasn't exactly what the modern followers of the ancient arts of massage and physical identification with the body had been preaching. Leary answered that he was bored with the body people. It's fine for people to become identified with their body, he said, but after they've done that, they still have to identify themselves with their central nervous system, with the genetic code, and lastly, with a superior plan. The psychiatrist remarked that Leary's ideas seem to differ from Eastern philosophies, which assume that the body, including the central nervous system, is not the individual. How did he come to develop such a different philosophy? Leary said he wasn't sure it was so different, but as a scientist, he had never wandered away from concepts that could be localized and reproduced. I don't believe in mushy Hindu heavens, he said, adding that the psychiatrist was talking like a human being. But he, Leary, was no longer human, he said. Besides, he was terribly distrustful of humanists. The people who had organized the meeting gave me a copy of a questionnaire Timothy Leary had developed to gather the opinions of other people concerning higher intelligence. It began with these questions. Do you believe that higher intelligence is a useful concept? What is your definition of higher intelligence? What is your definition of intelligence? I thought we were being trapped. The questions were in the wrong order, you know, and then he goes on about this. He says, like, you know, perhaps Leary and others had found a new bandwagon. Perhaps they're just expressing the aspirations and frustrations of a generation that has put man on the moon, but has done nothing for the Earth. Visitors from outer space would be a convenient interlude. They would offer the space effort and all its attendant industrial technology a new purpose in life. They would rescue Western civilization from its acute spiritual malaise. They would help transcend political emotions and pave the way to the unification of that enormous economic marketplace, planet Earth. Take these possibilities into consideration, and you will begin to understand why the idea of life in space is no longer a simple scientific speculation, but a social and political issue as well. Sensing this, the military authorities try to stay away from it as long as possible. So has the scientific community. He went to go meet with, Condon, the guy who had done that sort of famous UFO committee. But one of the most interesting people who he met with, like, on this sort of tip related to the sort of psyop angle and, like, Operation Wandering Soul and the possibility of that vis-a-vis Mothman. He met with this one guy who he calls Major Murphy. He says, I still believe, he still believes that an analysis of UFO sightings is necessary. Scientific analysis will undoubtedly provide part of the truth about UFOs. However, I no longer believe it will lead to the whole truth. I owe this realization to a man I shall call Major Murphy, although his actual rank is much higher than that of Major. One-star general, here we go. He taught me a lesson I am not likely to forget. Major Murphy, who retired from the U.S. intelligence service quite a few years ago, had seen action in World War II in Italy, and also described vividly his investigations in the Caribbean, where he organized efforts to intercept submarines and German spies on their way to the United States and then hire them. No, sorry, that's it. But, I met him at a gathering of UFO contactees and suggested a drink when it was over. I expressed my surprise at his interest in the event, which I had regarded as a complete waste of time. He asked me to clarify this judgment, and I said that in my opinion, none of the people in attendance knew anything about science. Then he posed a question that, obvious as it seems, had not really occurred to me. What makes you think that UFOs are a scientific problem? I replied with something to the effect that a problem was only scientific in the way it was approached, but he would have none of that, and began lecturing me. First, he said that science had certain rules. For example, it has to assume that the phenomenon it is observing is natural in origin, rather than artificial and possibly biased. Now, the UFO phenomenon could be controlled by alien beings. If it is, added the Major, then the study of it doesn't belong in science. It belongs in intelligence, meaning counter-espionage. And that, he pointed out, was his domain. Now, in the field of counter-espionage, the rules are completely different. He drew a simple diagram in my notebook. You are a scientist. In science, there is no concept of the price of information. Suppose I gave you 95% of the data concerning a phenomenon. You're happy because you know 95% of the phenomenon. It's not so in intelligence. If I got 95% of the data, I know this is the cheap part of the information. I still need the other 5%, but I will have to pay a much higher price to get it. You see, Hitler had 95% of the information about the landing in Normandy, but he had the wrong 95%. Are you saying the UFO data we use to compile statistics and find patterns with computers are useless, I asked? Might we be spinning our magnetic tapes endlessly, discovering spurious laws? It all depends how the team on the other side thinks. If they know what they're doing, there will be so many cutouts between you and them that you won't have the slightest chance of tracing your way to the truth. Not by following up sightings and throwing them into a computer. They will keep feeding you the information they want you to process. What is the only source of data about the UFO phenomenon? It is the UFOs themselves. Some things are beginning to make a lot of sense. If you're right, what can I do? It seems that research on the phenomenon is hopeless then. I might as well dump my computer into a river. Not necessarily, but you should try a different approach. First, you should work entirely outside of organized UFO groups. They are infiltrated by the same official agencies they are trying to influence, and they propagate any rumor anyone wants to have circulated. In intelligence circles, people like that are historical necessities. When you've worked long enough for Uncle Sam, you know he is involved in a lot of strange things. The data these groups get are biased to the source, but they play a useful role. Second, you should look for the irrational, the bizarre, the elements that do not fit. That's what I have come to observe at this meeting tonight. Have you ever felt that you were getting close to something that didn't seem to fit any irrational pattern, yet gave you a strong impression that it was significant? You know, he goes on to talk about Melchizedek's or whatever, wow. But anyway, the conclusion that, like, you know, he makes basically is that these groups and, like, this idea of people in space is useful and is being used by, like, certain operatives to kind of manipulate them. Like, you know, he says, according to Major Murphy, the confusion in the UFO mystery may be put them deliberately to achieve certain results. One of these results has been to keep scientists away. The other is to create the conditions for a new form of social control, a change in man's perception of his place in the universe. Are his theories fantastic? Before we decide, you know, he goes on to talk about some other facts, you know, about, he even mentions a racist philosophy, like the pernicious suggestion that some of us on Earth are of extraterrestrial descent and therefore constitute a higher race. The dangers inherent in this belief should be obvious to anybody who hasn't forgotten the genocides of World War II, executed on the premise that some races were somehow purer or better than others.
Yeah.
Things like that.
That's
The
it
idea
right
of social
there.
utopia, fantastic economic theories, including the belief that a world economy can be created overnight and that democracy should be abolished in favor of utopian systems, usually dictatorial in their outlook. Like, all this stuff is part of these UFO beliefs. So, like, the idea that some of this stuff might be, like, used as a manipulation, or its usefulness, like, not only... Yeah, like, on one hand, you could say, like, oh, well, what they were doing in Point Pleasant or whatever, for they were doing some kind of psyop around Mothman, that's, like, a testing ground or something for the Vietnamese. But you could also look at the other way around and say that, like, what they were doing to their own people... Like it's a testing ground for us. Or a testing ground really for everybody. It goes both ways. Yeah, exactly. It goes both ways. And I guess it's all maybe perhaps experimental in a way, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it doesn't go both ways in the sense that, like, the Vietnamese were, like, psyoping us with Mothman.
Well, yeah, it goes both ways in that, like, what they do in Vietnam and what they do here, like, is connected, which is, part of the whole thing.
Exactly. It almost necessitates that you have to because in many ways the Vietnam War was a laboratory for future theaters of conflict and the domestic front, and just as a lot of domestic experiments were meant to be ultimately exported, whether it's like dosing troops at the Edgewood Arsenal or things like that, and the UFO things,
Yeah, like, even Jacques Vallée said there, like, he believes at least that there was a real UFO phenomenon, but it was being used, like, in a certain way. And that definitely is, like, demonstrative. And I think that, also, like, that doesn't rule out that there were UFO incidents and that were fabricated or illusory or created by, like, human operatives. But it's definitely true that it was, like, it's documented that they did try to, like, control this. And one of the things was sort of just in the same way that that guy, like John Brown or whatever, Jack Brown, was, like, very dismissive of it. One of their main things that they sort of emphasized in, like, for instance, there was this one thing called the Robertson panel, which I guess was, like, a scientific panel that was sort of brought on by, like, a CIA review of Air Force investigations of the UFOs. And the recommendation of this panel, which was given some military intelligence. And, I don't know to what degree this was followed, probably to some extent. I think that probably it also wasn't followed, and in some ways maybe this belief was maybe managed instead of fully discouraged, but their recommendation was, try to get people not to believe in UFOs or try to discourage the belief because, like, that could be used against us. Like, if people are hysterical, people are, like, calling up and saying, like, I'm seeing these objects or, anything like that in these UFO groups, they were even saying, like, you should monitor, like, NICAP and monitor, like, APRO and all these groups, like, they need to be watched because, like, they're dangerous and they can shape the perceptions of the public. And one funny thing about that is that I think that they even mentioned, like, the whole H.G. Wells or the Orson Welles adaptation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, like, and I think that's probably the origin of, like, the idea that there's, like, this big mass hysteria where, like, I think that recent sort of retrospectives on this have tried to determine that, like, the extent to which there was mass hysteria was a bit overblown. But I think that was almost, like, something that people were told to sort of teach them about the dangers of being hysterical about these alien things, like, it's a story, like, the distortion of it, the story of this huge panic that really wasn't as huge as it's often remembered to have been, like, as, the dangers of it.
A gray scare, if you will.
Yeah, it was a gray scare. Yeah, exactly. But, the whole, they definitely encouraged a lot of, like, public programming to sort of teach people that, like, UFOs aren't real. But I think that probably on the other side, they're like, well, if this belief is so powerful and it can be used by our enemies, like, we should use it as well. I think that's definitely the case. Yeah.
Related to that of, like, UFOs as threat, I just discovered a couple interesting articles that I wanted to know a little more about. The Vietnam UFO wave in 1968 that Keel mentioned, and I guess there was a lot going on in regards to that. I find it weird that I feel it, like, I guess maybe it was on this History Channel. I mean, one of these articles is, like, from historychannel.com, the other one's from HuffPo. So I guess if you watch History Channel UFO shows, you might know about this, but I feel like it's not a huge part of, like, the UFO discourse. Like, I don't hear didn't really hear like either Stephen Greer or Tom DeLonge in either of their movies like bring this up. They always talked about how the UFOs would turn off our nuclear missiles or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't talk about how UFOs first appeared in the aftermath, or I guess, in the tail end of the Korean War, and they were not friendly to the U.S. imperialists. According to the testimony of certain soldiers. But there were a lot of UFO sightings, and there were UFO attacks, apparently, allegedly. So let me read a little bit, like, first of, like, what happened here. This is just from a couple years ago, when dozens of Korean War GIs claimed a UFO made them sick. Theories range from high-tech Soviet death rays to extraterrestrials studying human combat to combat stress-induced hallucinations. In May 1951, 1 year into the Korean War, PFC Francis P. Wall and his regiment found themselves stationed near Chorwon, about 60 miles north of Seoul. As they were preparing to bombard a nearby village with artillery, great guys, bombard that village, all of a sudden, the soldiers saw a strange sight up in the hills, like, quote, a jack-o'-lantern came wafting down across the mountain. What happened after, the pulsing, quote, attacking light, the lingering debilitating symptoms, would mystify many for decades to come. As the GIs watched, the craft made its way down into the village, where the artillery air bursts were starting to explode. Quote, we further noticed that this object would get right into the center of an airburst of artillery and yet remain unharmed, Wall later told John P. Timmerman of the Center for UFO Studies in a 1987 interview. Suddenly the object turned, Wall said, and whereas at first it had glowed orange, now it was a pulsating blue-green brilliant light. He asked his company commander for permission to fire at the object with armor-piercing bullets from an M1 rifle. As the bullets hit the body of the craft, he recalled, they made a metallic ding. The object started behaving still more erratically, shunting from side to side as its lights flashed on and off. Wall's recollections of what happened next are stranger still. We were attacked, he said, swept by some form of a ray that was emitted in pulses, in waves that you could visually see only when it was aiming directly at you. That is to say, like a searchlight sweeps around and the segments of light, you would see it coming at you. He remembered a burning, tingling sensation sweeping over his body, as if he were being penetrated. The men rushed into underground bunkers and peeped through the windows, watching as the craft hovered above them and then shot off at a 45-degree angle. It's that quick, he said. It was there and was gone. 3 days after the incident, the entire company of men was evacuated by ambulance, with special roads cut to haul out those too weak to walk. When they finally received medical treatment, they were found to have dysentery. Can relate. And an extremely high white blood cell count. To me, says Richard F. Haynes, a UFO researcher and former NASA scientist, they had symptoms that sounded like the effects of radiation. Was it an experimental?
Are you sure they just didn't drink some the water from a certain well? What year was this?
That happened in 1951. So in the heat of the Korean War.
Yeah. I guess that was still after like the Kenneth Arnold stuff, like the whole terming of like the flying saucers, and I guess that was after Roswell, and everything. But there were, even before that, there were the whole thing, the Foo Fighters, Foo Fighters. Which were it actually... World War II UFOs, No, it actually gets into that a little bit here, because they tried to figure out... The first thought everyone had was that this was some kind of Soviet thing. It says that, there were dozens of men throughout the Korean War that reported seeing similar unidentified flying objects. Over the course of the 37-month conflict, the craft often resembled flying saucers. According to unofficial reports, as many as 42 were corroborated by additional witness reports, an average more of one a month in just over 3 years. At first, according to Korean War historian Paul M. Edwards, many researchers believed that the sightings were Soviet experiments based on German technology and foreign research in anti-gravity. These were supposedly so large they could carry 50 tons of weight and were powered by electromagnetic propulsion, he writes in unusual footnotes to the Korean War. What was being sighted, it was suggested, were discs the Russians were testing over the Korean skies. But in the years since the fall of the Soviet Union, a number of Soviet reports of citing UFOs over Korea have trickled in, discrediting these theories. So apparently the Soviets were also seeing them and being like, what the hell are these? It says, why were there so many UFO sightings throughout the Korean War? Were they the product of thousands of exhausted men under incredible stress, or a sign of something more mysterious? It says, obviously, from 1952 until 1986, the United States Air Force ran Project Blue Book,
a systematic study into UFOs and their potential threat to national security. When it was shuttered in 1969, they said they found nothing of note, though it does say there 1986, not 69. I think a lot of people obviously believe that it wasn't really shut down, etc. And I guess there's this one scientist that they talked to. He says, I don't believe in them. I don't not believe in them. I'm trying to let the data convince me one way or the other, which is the scientific approach. This guy, what's his name? Haynes, says they thought they might be Soviet or Chinese vessels with unknown technology. But he says if they were, they would have been building those crafts for use in later wars like the Vietnam War, for instance. The Soviet UFO sightings Edwards describes make it similarly unlikely, as do the impossibly high-tech specifications of some of the sightings. In Wall's case, for instance, he described a kind of force field taking effect after a while after he began shooting, where his bullets simply ricocheted away from the craft. Haynes, for his part, believes the rash of sightings across the Korean War might suggest that something in the universe is especially interested in how human beings behave in the throng of military action. We tend to be very creative to fight a war, Haynes says, listing off the various sciences and technologies that might come into play in military action. If you were interested in how another country or another race of people fought their wars, you'd want to collect more information on that, wouldn't you? He trails off. That's one possible explanation. There may be others. But you know what? The people in that squadron that encountered this UFO with like a force field, they basically had long-lasting after effects of this like sickness, including Wall went from 180 pounds to 138. He had stomach problems and periods of disorientation and memory loss after returning to the U.S. And basically had to retire at 42 and take a disability. I guess he would consistently tell his UFO story over the years, and the details basically I don't know. They also say, actually, okay, the last thing I'll read because it's relevant to us. They say it might have also been a moment of feverish delirium. Even the raised white blood cell count that surprised army doctors and Haynes is consistent with many of the bacterial infections which might also cause severe dysentery, as are hallucinations. So, like, what I experienced having fever dreams of like our North Korean guides like coming to get us, I guess, is they're saying that perhaps he drank some Kim Il-sung water and they all drank water from a stream and all got messed up. But I don't really know. I mean, you didn't have the same dream that I did when I dreamed that our tour bus showed up.
I didn't experience these weird dreams, so yeah, I don't know.
Again, it's like Mothman. Like how big can a collective delusion or hallucination be before you just have to accept that like people experienced a common sighting, or I mean, they all got sick, so like I don't know, like it's interesting, isn't it? It's also very interesting that the UFO seems to be firmly on the side of the Juche idea, and it's all about driving out these U.S. imperialists with its like wonder weapons, I suppose.
Yeah, there is an interesting thing actually in that same letter I mentioned from 1966 from Ivan Sanderson to John Keel, the same one where he talks about where he makes that racist remark about tropical African origin of some guy who mugged his friend, I guess. He also says something interesting about Kenneth Arnold, the guy who coined the term flying saucers and first saw flying saucers, and this guy himself, despite being apparently a huge coward and paranoiac who was always just freaking out over people spying on him, or and always feeling betrayed and just worked up over stuff, he was also pretty spooked up himself, and he had a lot of intelligence connections and sponsoring his Yeti work and things like that, and he always wanted to be a loyal soldier. But so he does have some perhaps insights, I don't know, but he said, though I may well be wrong on several counts, I have always felt that one good example of each of all the kinds of phenomena involved is quite enough, followed by a mere note in the number and distribution of similar cases, and then right into comment, analysis, and speculation of this item, and how it does or might fit into an overall pattern. If I have to read another housewife seeing an odd light in the sky at night, I'll finally lose interest in the whole business. And if I have to hear about Kenneth Arnold again, which I will, I would like to see a full examination and analysis of his connections with the Pentagon prior to his first alleged sighting, and some appraisal of the very strong story that this was a deliberate plant by that august body. Further, somebody ought to come right out with the facts about Arnold's incredible collection of tapes of what he alleges are direct communications with space people. He's got a house in a mountain, Erie in Ohio, that is said to be stuffed full of gadgetry, and I was told, when in Berkeley, this is crossed out and says no Seattle, by a man who said that he had been there, that Arnold is far further out than any Adamski ever was. This little fact puts an entirely different complexion on the whole of ufology and the official behavior. What if our DoD, possibly in conjunction with other governments, did deliberately initiate and foster the whole business, using a hard-boiled businessman, politician, flyer to do so? Was, in fact, the catchphrase flying saucer very deliberately chosen, as some say, by the best psychological warfare boys? So... That's,
Wait, so you're saying that secretly, what if secretly the Soviets and the Americans were working on UFO technology together?
He doesn't say the Soviets, but he does say in connection with other governments. The Soviets could be implied, but he does, yeah, what if our DoD possibly in conjunction with other governments? So, yeah, that could be the Soviets. It could be somebody else.
I mean, like, that would hypothetically describe why both sides acted like, hey, what's this? We have no idea about it. But I also don't quite buy that.
It would be interesting if there were, like, a sort of joint task force, to... Maybe I will say, like, if there was, like, recovered alien bodies or something like that, like, I would almost, like, not rule out some kind of, like, extremely high level, like, look, we found aliens, like, we can't really, like, tell the world this, but, it's, like, too dangerous, but... yeah, maybe it's like on this one issue we manage it somehow or something like that. Another possibility would be that, like, a bunch of, like, class traders, like, within the Soviet Union, like, like factions within the governments, would be like, we need to, like, stop, probably thinking like we're gonna try to stop the Cold War or something, and achieve this whole thing of world peace, maybe that would be like the agenda, like we can
I would wonder about that.
Integrate by having the one world utopia,
I would wonder that about the later period in the 1970s when at the Esalen Institute, I believe they hosted the Soviet American like Friendship Society. It had a name like that was basically specifically for American scientists and Soviet scientists to collaborate and like share research, and particularly in kind of parapsychological, paraphysical research that both sides were doing. And then that fostered a certain kind of we'd have to dig into it to see like who were these personalities and like to what degree how did they all become turncoats and stuff. But it is interesting that the Esalen Institute sponsored Boris Yeltsin's trip to the U.S. in the 80s, where he claimed that he was converted to capitalism by like walking into a Houston supermarket, and like he like had almost like an ecstatic revelation looking at all like the Twinkies and like Lucky Charms cereal and stuff, that this was heaven, and he wanted to go back to Russia and destroy communism and watch communism die, basically. So it's like there's some interesting, there was an element of like that backdoor kind of cooperation, diplomacy on the margins of like this kind of out there stuff like UFOs or parapsychology and shit. Just to like kind of touch on like the sort of global scope of like the prophecies in the Mothman prophecies that were being fed to John Keel like by these entities. Like he was hearing like a lot of interesting stuff, basically. Let me see if I can get them. There are some like amazing messages that he wrote based on like what he, like the messages that he had received from people, or from, alleged aliens or beings about what might happen. He like actually wrote them as friends, including Ivan T. Sanderson, to try to prepare them for what was going to happen. He wrote, to whom it may concern. I think a copy of this was, sent to Ivan Sanderson. But for the past 2 weeks, a chain of seemingly unrelated events have taken place. This is July 23rd, 1967. All of which are directly related to the mystery of unidentified flying objects, even though this doesn't seem apparent to the casual observer. These events will reach a spectacular climax in this coming week, provided my analysis and interpretation are as accurate as they have been in the past.
On or about July 26th, there will be an active assassination in the Middle East which will shake the world. This murder will be carried out by a person or group of persons yet unknown to me. As in the Kennedy assassination, this act will probably be arranged that it will appear to be the work of one man or one small group of men with seemingly deranged motives. What he thought was that, like, Pope Paul was going to be killed by, like, some dude, like, all in black, like, on a visit to Turkey.
Well, he's close. A Turkish guy, like, 14 years later did shoot the Pope.
He did point out that he was close, or that there was an attempt on his...
And what if he was really thinking about Bobby Kennedy getting shot by Sirhan? Bobby Kennedy's Catholic, so maybe it was, like, a little bit of,
The aliens did talk to him about Bobby Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe a little bit.
Really?
Actually, yeah, they said that Bobby Kennedy was supposed to come help Marilyn Monroe. I don't think that they predicted Bobby Kennedy's death. He kind of, like in the Mothman Prophecies, tries to make it sound like they did, but I couldn't find anything to confirm that they did. He did receive like a he says in the book, like, I got a warning about Bobby Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe, but she he asked Jay
via the channel he
asked the channel Jay if Jack Kennedy's death were involved in all this. She hedged and said that Bobby Kennedy was involved in Marilyn Monroe's death. Bobby was supposed to rescue Marilyn as a publicity stunt, but failed to answer the phone when Marilyn called him to say that she had taken an overdose on drugs. So apparently that was a psyop.
Wait, hold on. We're talking about big events here. Like, was JFK murdered for trying to, like, expose the truth about ETs? And they're saying, like, don't worry about that, but let me tell you some really juicy tidbits about, like Bobby Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe's personal life. And, like...
yes.
Okay.
And that exact thing didn't really make it into the Mothman Prophecies. Let me see what actually how he rendered that in the Mothman Prophecies, because it was a bit different. I was compelled to look that up because the way he phrased in the Mothman Prophecies made it sound very, very different. I went out to Mount Misery and hypnotized Jane. She was a good subject, and after performing various tests to assure myself that she was really in a deep trance, I began to ask her subtle questions about Apple, one of the aliens, and his friend. To my utter amazement, the impossible happened. The control was taken away from me. I couldn't direct the session. Instead, I found myself talking directly to Apple through Jane. He wanted to talk about Marilyn Monroe and Robert Kennedy. I didn't want to gossip, I insisted, but wanted some hard facts on the overall situation. Apple persisted, warning me that Kennedy was in grave danger. Where was he talking from? He said he parked nearby in his Cadillac. He made some specific predictions about pending plane crashes and returned to Marilyn and Kennedy. So according to this, he did say Bobby Kennedy was in grave danger, but in his actual notes in the hypnosis session, he doesn't mention that. So maybe it did happen and he didn't think to take it down. But just to return to this thing that he was writing to his friends. So he was saying that, there's going to be this Middle East attack. Shortly after this crime is committed, there will be a massive power failure affecting millions of people. It will probably begin either on the night of the 26th or the 27th. This blackout will be of unusually long duration. It may last for as long as 3 days. They kept referring to actually using the terminology of 3 days of darkness, something that we've heard often about Q lately. The power failure, I guess it's, common thing, but the power failure may be accompanied by awesome astronomical phenomena. The sun itself may be blotted out during this period in a repass of the days of darkness recorded in all historical documents of 2,000 years ago. During this crisis, strange unidentified flying lights will appear in all quarters of the world. So, all quarters of the world, there you go. These lights will flash signals repeatedly in the following pattern: 7, 4, 12, 1. If all this takes place, there may also be a total blackout of the world's communications, radios, telephones, etc. Trump will take over, and he will say that Hillary is the next. No,
the EMP bomb will go off.
Yeah, well, literally, that's what they were talking about, an EM event. That's how it's described in Prophecies. Should these events come to pass, I will disappear for several days. Please do not circulate these predictions. There is no need to start any rumors. The existence of these predictions could cause me extreme embarrassment if these things do not occur.
Well,
no shit. Yeah. So, he also, wrote typewritten notes, that he didn't mail, but he sent, to the aliens. They were, meant for the aliens, but he didn't actually, send them out. He was hopefully the aliens will read my mind. He would send,
where would you send them?
I guess maybe to the contactee that was sort of
I
the
see.
Aliens. So
gotcha.
That would kind of be one possibility. But I guess it also it does raise the question of but the fact that he never, they were supposed to be kind of borderline physical beings, but he never actually met them face to face is kind of something. Yeah. So he says, "Dear friends, I will not mail this letter to you. If you receive its contents through your own methods, let me know by ringing my telephone once when I finish writing this. You seem to have some way of listening into my thoughts, and I would like you to verify this is happening. There is not much time left. Even now, the people in the Vatican are preparing for the events of this coming week. The throne of St. Peter is being readied. Pope Paul is no doubt praying and making ready to face his certain fate. Can we change destiny? Can we deliver the Pope safely? Are all the events of our world determined in advance? If you have the power, or if your Lord has the power to alter the great plan, would you actually try to do this? Tonight on the phone, I suggested that you black out the home airport or interfere in some other way with the Pope's flight before he actually leaves home. This seems to me to be the best way to forestall the prophecy disaster. The only other way would be to find and destroy the conspirators before they can harm the Pope. I don't think any amount of security precautions and bodyguards can protect the Pope once he is in Turkey. If the Pope cancels his plans to visit Turkey, we will know then that you somehow reached him. In previous letters, I have expressed my concern over the great EM effect being planned. I understand this plan and I fear it. I fear that it will create chaos and might even lead to accidental war between the great nations of the earth. I know that you have been preparing for these days for many years, perhaps for centuries, and do not expect you to alter your plans because I, a mere mortal man, and not a very important one at that, ask you to. But is there not some way for you to modify your plan? Is there not some way you can impress your existence upon us without creating terror and chaos? Please believe that I appreciate very much that you have listened to me at all, and that you have taken my words into your counsels. But I cannot take responsibility for your actions. I cannot truly advise you. I can only offer my own humble opinions and help and however I can. The enemy is at the gates. The die is cast. If you are to save man from the fate already planned, you must begin now. I stand ready to serve you, but always remember that I must serve man first. I do not reject you. Let me know what I can do."
Wow, that's such a more satisfying passage than, like, that's what I wanted from Dr. Stephen Greer when he was talking about making meaningful contact. That whatever that thing you just read was, it definitely had felt meaningful to him, like, at least.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah, it does seem like he believes it for sure. He's into it. There was another one where he said, like, why can't you just, like, rain gossamer down on the holy places of the Middle East instead? Like,
rain gossamer?
Yeah, like,
what is gossamer?
It's like, kind of like a sort of material, like some kind of filmy substance. I think that there actually have been, like, Fortean events where, like, this sort of insubstantial matter has fallen down, like from the air, like, in history, it's, like, I guess it's just some kind of, like, weird filmy substance, like a silvery sort of substance. Like, a lot of the time you hear, like, butterflies have gossamer wings, So
okay, yeah, that like I have heard that.
No.
Oh God! No! Yeah, why does he want a mothy film to be, like, laid over all of the? Is that going to protect them from the EMP? Maybe.
I think it was supposed to be a signal. If I search for Appel, which is the name of the guy, maybe there's on johnkeel.com. There's a lot of copies of Apple's, like, messages. And they're, like, written in this bizarre, like, all caps hand, where he talks about all these things. And he filled out, like, questionnaires for John Keel and everything, trying to, answer his questions about, humanity. There's a lot of stuff that, it's just people look into. But, I'm trying to dig up that gossamer letter. I thought that I'd save it in the workflowy, but, I guess, they also consistently said that he should get married to the woman who was contacting him or contacting them, so
the woman was relaying these messages to him.
Yes.
And saying, the aliens are saying that we should get married.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly
Cool.
what happened.
Word.
Yeah, and he wrote letters to them like pleading and explaining like, please don't control my mind and make me like mate with this woman, because I don't think that would lead to a successful relationship. Like,
oh my god, I love this. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Don't.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there.
Like he's like, I understand that you could control my mind and like force me to marry Timna, which is what they called her. Her real name was like Jay. Which I don't even think that was her real name, but that was like the name that Keel knew her by or referred to her by. But
okay,
they called her Timna, Tim apostrophe Na, and I guess I told him that Mothman was coming to Long Island, and he said, I am concerned about Mothman's arrival on Long Island. I was concerned about that.
I mean, was he going to Montauk? Because
he was going to Mount Misery in Suffolk County. I've actually been there before. There actually is there's a
Mount Misery on Long Island?
Yeah, it's the highest point on Long Island.
Wow.
And to this day, actually, there is a sort of legend around Sweet Hollow Road, which is like very close by that. Like, if you keep your car in neutral, like ghosts will push it.
There's a road in Santa Cruz that had a similar legend for us.
That would make sense.
It defied gravity. I think actually no, it got like commodified. I think it's called the Mystery Spot. You see bumper stickers for it everywhere, but I think it's technically it's like an optical illusion. Like it looks like you're facing downhill, but then like you roll upwards, and like it blows your mind, man.
It was something like that. Yeah, like you're under a spooky bridge. It was kind of some kind of thing like that. But yeah, I'm having trouble finding his Gossamer letter. But yeah, he definitely did say it. One of his many appeals to the aliens. But it was basically in the same tone as that. Just trying to plead with them about how to best work out, their plan to, I guess, reveal themselves and do this massive days of darkness and manifestation.
Okay, we're back. So I think as we reach the mothy climax here, I think we have to talk about the one disaster that did occur, which was the collapse of the Silver Bridge in 1967. The grand punctuation to the age of the Mothman.
Yeah, we kind of touched on it before, but John Keel, of course, as we talked about, he had received all of these predictions from these sundry beings, but a lot of them, some of them kind of vaguely came true, but for the most part, they didn't strictly happen. But he was basically he had heard, let me see if I can find the actual part of the book where he discusses it, but the aliens basically had told him that LBJ was gonna plug in the Christmas tree on the White House lawn, And at that very moment, the aliens were going to create like a huge blackout across like the entire country, and like possibly like across the world. Yeah, here it is. He says, the U.S. Air Force lied to me. The telephone company lied to me. The UFO entities lied to me. My own senses had, on occasion, lied to me. As December 15th drew closer, I kept my mouth shut and told no one that I expected a major blackout. After all, Pope Paul had escaped assassination in Turkey. None of the chemical factories along the Ohio had exploded. Maybe this is just another mischievous error of prophecy, and a description of something in the past or far in the future. A security officer for the Transit Authority and an old friend of mine, Joe Woodvine, happened to drop by my apartment late on the afternoon of the 15th. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and he knew nothing about UFOs and my capers. I didn't mention the blackout until Dan Drassen stopped in. Joe listened in open-mouthed amazement as I explained to Dan that I expected the nation to blow a fuse the moment President Johnson pulled that switch. Dan was as far gone as I was. He glanced nervously at his watch and decided that if there was going to be a blackout, he preferred to be in his own apartment. Maybe he didn't like believe that, or just was like, I need to get out of the way from this guy. But anyway, Joe became very silent, probably wondering if we were dangerous. Dan left around 5 p.m. I switched on the television. At 5:45, the brief White House ceremony began. I broke out my candles and flashlights. Joe watched me worriedly. President Johnson delivered the customary little speech to the crowd on the White House lawn. Reach for the switch. Rid the Christmas tree. I guess it looks like a rid, but anyway. And the Christmas tree blazed with light. The crowd oohed and awed as if they had never seen a Christmas tree before. My lights did not go out. Joe studied me silently. Suddenly, an announcer's voice came over the crowd noises. We interrupt this program, he announced flatly, for a special bulletin. A bridge laden with rush hour traffic has collapsed at Gallipolis, Gallipolis, Ohio. I don't know why I said that. Further details as soon as they are available. I fell back in my chair. There was no bridge at Gallipolis, Ohio. The only bridge on that stretch of the river was a 700-foot silver bridge at Point Pleasant. The bridge I had crossed 1,000 times.
Oh,
They done
my
it
God.
again, I finally muttered softly. Those lousy bastards have done it again. They knew this was going to happen, and when. And they gave me all that bilge about a power failure. They knew. They just didn't want me to be able to warn anyone. They? Who's they, John? Joe asked gently. The phone rang. It was Dan. Did you hear? I heard. I guess that's what this was all about, Dan. That's what it was all about. So,
wow. Okay.
you know.
So, well, yeah, that's I can understand why he felt very insulted by. It's like he expected Lyndon Johnson to be like, it was a mistake to test the Mothman.
He definitely expected it to be a mistake. That definitely was gonna happen.
But instead, that's still that is weird that he thought that. I mean, I guess it's not like the bridge collapsed at the exact moment that Lyndon Johnson plugged in the Christmas
tree. No, it happened a little
bit
after. Basically, like none of the prophecies that he was given, they really like only very vaguely like could be considered to have like possibly like borne a resemblance to reality. And there is like a machine gun aspect to these things where like they told him a bunch of stuff like Ivan Sanderson's gonna die soon, but unfortunately he did not die anything remotely soon after that was said. You got
to write some great prefaces.
Exactly.
He
moved on to write that preface, and it is eerie that there was this aspect of prophecy and like this whole, expecting this horrible event and knew certain something horrible was going to happen, that these beings could see the future, and then, like kind of begging them and like being so wrapped up in like their ability to control like these horrible events. I mean, it must have been psychologically devastating in a way, because you can see like that he really was like into it, and then this happened, I mean, there's something to it.
Such a kind of close but no cigar kind of a sensation to it. Like if only he had predicted that disaster was going to strike the area around Point Pleasant, then people would have rallied around him like a prophet.
It's actually something that like the movie The Mothman Prophecies with Richard Gere like captures pretty well. Like I saw that movie, like as you said, I'm like a big moth head. I've been a moth head like since I was pretty young, and I saw that movie in theaters in 2002. Like I think that might have been the first R-rated movie I ever saw or something.
Oh yeah, I remember the poster, very iconic. It's like a Rorschach blot that's a moth outline. Yeah.
Because and that's like and that movie like actually does a decent job of like capturing like I think I was disappointed at the time because I was like a kid and like I don't think I had even read the Mothman Prophecies at that point, like the book, and I was expecting kind of like something about like your cryptid Mothman, where like he's a creature and like he's flapping around, but like really like that isn't really so much in the movie, and it's more about like the like Richard Gere like losing his mind over the idea that like these beings have the secret to what's going to happen. Like there's kind of an emotional hook where like his wife died after seeing some kind of like red eyes in a car accident, and like he's kind of like I wish I could have prevented this, blah blah blah. So that's like the kind of psychological hook. But the sweaty guy who wrote it, the Salieri guy who wrote it, actually did like a pretty good job of like conveying like what is interesting about the John Keel book, because the phenomenon is very like nebulous, and like what makes him go nuts is that there's even a part where he like basically like humiliates himself because he's like in the book like a respectable journalist. He's not like a ufologist or in the movie that is. He's like a respectable journalist or something, and he goes up to like this senator or something and is like, Senator, like this thing is gonna blow up, like this power plant's gonna blow up, like you have to get away or whatever, like don't go in there. And he's like, what are you doing, Klein, like stop this, like, and like nothing happens, and like he has to like go back to like New York in humiliation, and whoever, like I think Laura Linney is like his love interest, and she has to like plead with him like like John Keel, like John Keel stand-in, like or whatever, like John Klein or something. Like you have to like let this go, like
it's destroying. It's destroying
at one
us.
point, like the entity, like Indrid Cold, which is like one of the many entities that appears in Mothman Prophecies, is like saying like if you wait by your phone at this time, like your wife will talk to you, and like Laura Linney is like whoever's gonna talk to you on that phone, like it's not your wife, like like I don't know like what God is, but he has nothing to do with Indrid Cold or whatever, like
wow.
And he like basically has to, it's different from, it's kind of like like in a lot of these detective stories you want like a clear answer and stuff, and like especially in movies like that with a mystery, but like it is a little bit different in that like it's all about like having to let go of like wanting an explanation, because otherwise you'll lose your mind. So it turns out like the same kind of thing happens where there's a fake where like he thought one thing was going to happen, but it turned out to be this bridge, and you get the kind of it does convey the sense of how like when you're wrapped up in all this stuff, like in this whole world of all these like MIBs and these weird like bizarre behaving ufologists and like possibly like government interference and stuff like that, like, and just being very paranoid, like that could really be a devastating thing.
It's got a resonance to like kind of the what we kind of recently experienced with like QAnon, and expecting that like, because they did look forward to January 6th as a day that was going to change everything. It just, then it's like that day did change everything, but in kind of the exact opposite way that they thought, and like it was like a cruel joke.
Wow.
Like I guess you could say like moths to a flame.
They did, yes, they went like it's true, yes, definitely.
It's like there is a kind of undercurrent of like deception, like an even a kind of a like a satanic sense of humor, of trickery going on. I mean,
maybe Q is an AI god, like that guy said. Maybe he is one of these entities, like, because that's the thing about like all these MIBs, they always have this weird electronic kind of quality to their voice, like maybe Q is one of them, or maybe it's part of that same kind of like John Tidor type psyop, like we talked about in our Q episode, like with all the people like I'm a time traveler, that's kind of what the Mothman thing was, like I'm a time traveler, like I know the future, basically.
A little bit. They know, like, if they know the future, they have some kind of access to like the forward timeline.
They're outside space and time, so in a way, they are time travelers more or less. So it's kind of the same thing, but like on a much it does kind of help you see the trajectory, or help one to imagine a possible trajectory of like the psyop, where like in this you kind of see John Keel like being just completely driven out of his mind to the point where he's like on his typewriter, like sitting there, like leaving aside the question of like the reality of these phenomena, like if you think about it in a psyop way, like he's sitting there at his typewriter, like they've got him completely, like even if it's a psyop by aliens or a psyop by alien imposters. Like they've just totally got like this guy's typewriter like begging them, begging them like no, like with complete conviction, like please don't like destroy humanity, like so it really like and then you can see like later on. And it's the same thing with, like, 4chan. Like, first it's kind of like a joke, like, oh, I'm a time traveler, blah, blah. Like, Harry Reid is going to lead, like, an army of Democrats against, like, an army of Republicans. Like, and there's going to be a civil war. Like, it's going to start and, like, such and such, like, stuff like that. You can see how, like, both of those things kind of evolve where it's, like, from, like, one person or from, like, kind of a joke or playing around to something that has mass potential, like, either, like, in a UFO cult movement, a Stephen Greer type thing to the Stars Academy type thing, or, like, something like Q. So, yeah, there definitely is a parallel there. And Q even sounds like a name that one of these aliens would have, honestly. Like,
exactly. Mysterious. But actually that's something that is kind of interesting that, like, I guess ended up because of the bridge collapse, the Silver Bridge collapsing and 46 people dying, etc. And I guess along with John Keel's work in general, like being like when we think of Mothman, we think of prophesying disasters. So basically, I guess to the extent that any kind of Mothmen have arrived on the scene in subsequent decades, it usually pops up in the preceding hours or days before a gigantic disaster. And like there's one example that we looked into a little bit was in Russia. And there's an article in the Free Georgia newspaper from May 2002. And we have an evil AI translated version of it into English, but I'll just read. So, just like how UFOs obviously were popping up all over the Soviet Union, wouldn't you know it, Mothman may have as well. So it says that it's called The Ghosts of Disasters, and says UFO scientists claim to have predicted an accident in America, an explosion in houses in Moscow, and several hundred more natural disasters and terrorist attacks, but nobody listened to them. A month ago, the movie Mothman, I think it means Mothman Prophecies, was released on the screens of cinemas.
It's a 2002 article. So.
Based, according to the creators, on real events. The film is based on the research of the famous ufologist John Keel.
This is, I think, Google Translate, so there might be like some weird things. Yeah, like
some weird things. It just adds more flavor to it. Who since 1976 has been studying paranormal phenomena called, quote, moths in ufology. In simple terms, we are talking about creatures with wings, similar to angels, which people see on the eve of major disasters. According to Keel, moths were seen in the American city of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, shortly before the collapse of the bridge over the river killed several dozen drivers languishing in a traffic jam, as well as in the vicinity of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant shortly before the disaster in 1986. Which I think you mentioned that the screenwriter says he like made that up.
Because like in the Mothman Prophecies movie, there's a point where like there's actually like obviously the character John Klein is standing for John Keel, but like then he meets some other guy named like Alexander Leak or something, which is Keel backwards, who is like kind of the the wise mentor, but he's like, I don't want anything to do with this. Like, leave me alone. Like, get away from this business, And he's like, they see them all the time, like these Mothmen. Like at this, it gives like a list of like appearances of Mothmen, like before the Mount St. Helens eruption or like what. I don't know,
wow!
Stuff like that.
No!
Lists off
like
a bunch
Chernobyl's
of, like,
on
famous
it.
Disasters.
And
the documentary, the Mothman Legacy.
Did Mothman working for the CIA do Chernobyl? Did they astrally project some Mothman agents as wreckers? Who can say? But apparently
that guy claimed that he made that up like as a detail in the movie, and then people started to say like, oh my god, Mothman was
exactly. I mean, there is a separate angle that like CIA agents like did it, but I don't believe, I've never heard accusations from like the Russian Soviet side that there was sightings of a Mothman, I remain open to it.
Obviously suppressed. They were very negative about Mothman stuff, I think, because or UFOs. They thought right? Like for the most part, there was a little bit of curiosity.
No, because remember they had that scientist go on TV in 1968 and like call on Soviet citizens as like your civic duty to like report all of UFO sightings because there were a bunch of them happening, and that was I think the first time that they kind of acknowledged and
so
kind of encouraged it to some degree.
Yeah, they kind of have shifted. Yeah, I guess they.
Yeah. But at this point, it goes. This article goes into 1999, and actually, I guess where the FSB got a little bit. Started taking certain things seriously. They write, as the correspondents of ZHG, this magazine, managed to find out, in Russia it has been known about the mysterious appearance of the so-called moths for a long time. Several UFO organizations are studying them. One of them, the Russian House Center for Ufology and Bioenergy, in the summer of 1999 sent prophecies about a catastrophe on the Kashirskoye Highway to the Moscow government by registered mail. At that time, no one took the scientists' assumptions seriously, and what happened a month after that, everyone knows. The terrorists blew up the house, from the rubble of which they removed 109 dead. There was a fear that the FSB would come to us and accuse us of involvement in the terrorist attack, says the head of the center, Alexander Galtsev. It is because of fear that we cannot prevent catastrophes. Some of the prophets are afraid of being accused of schizophrenia, while others are simply afraid of the consequences. Meanwhile, the Mothman was seen by residents of neighboring houses in the area of the Kashirskoye Highway. And this is documented! For example, a few days before what happened on the air of the radio station Echo of Moscow, a man called who, by the way, was mistaken and warned that it was dangerous to live there and that he had had such visions. There are other eyewitnesses. Our employees talked with residents of neighboring houses, and we managed to find 2 pensioners who did not know each other who told that they saw from the windows of their houses late at night a certain black bird with the outlines of human arms, legs, and head. In his book, ufologist John Keel most accurately described moths. In his words, these are humanoid creatures that are the harbingers of catastrophes and natural disasters, and by their appearance warn people of misfortune. Sometimes they come into contact on a subconscious level. It seems to people that they are talking. Their mannerisms and speech are stern and formal, somewhat automatic and comic, but menacing nonetheless. One of the theories popular in the West claims that moths are hallucinations experienced by people feeling trouble or having experienced a catastrophe. Subheader, the priests call them angels. Many American newspapers specializing in anomalous phenomena after the famous 9/11 terrorist attack published interviews with dozens of eyewitnesses who claimed to have seen strange creatures in the sky near the Twin Towers, similar to huge birds with human legs or conversely people with wings. According to ufologists, this was just another phenomenon of moths. There are hundreds of such cases, says Alexander Galtsev, and the main thing that we managed to prove is that it is impossible to prevent them. After all, this is not even clairvoyance. The moth is completely random to people living at the site of a future disaster or in its vicinity. It can be seen by 1 or 2, as well as dozens of people, and the only thing they can do is to flee from a dangerous place to another area, city, country. To warn someone is simply pointless. I talked about these phenomena with a priest, rector of the Church of the Holy Trinity in Moscow. He put forward an interesting version. Maybe the moths are actually guardian angels who warn only believers and sinless people about misfortune. This theory is interesting, but like many others, it is simply unprovable. To date, there is not a single photograph or videotape depicting the Mothman. It is not even known whether he is one or several. After all, it appears in various parts of the planet, moving in an unknown way, disappearing and manifesting itself as an unidentified flying object. Here's an example. Our colleagues from the Tbilisi UFO organization sent us at the end of April materials that a certain person comes to the Church of St. David who is mistaken for mentally ill. He claims that the church is in danger and asks to stop services. Allegedly, a ghost with wings told him about this, which comes to his house at night. On April 25th, an earthquake hit Georgia, damaged 130 architectural monuments, including the Church of St. David, built in the 19th century, and just a few days later, a message came that they saw a Mothman in China. A China Northern liner MD-82 crashed near the port city of Dalian in the northeast of the country. The Beijing morning newspaper published conversations with residents of the Dalian neighborhood who claimed to know how the disaster will happen. A person who looked like a moth appeared to someone in a dream. This is a great translated final sentence.
Okay.
A person who looked like a moth appeared to someone in a dream, someone saw a ghost right in his house. The end. And so, I mean, okay. Now I'm starting to get convinced that whatever the Mothman is, he actually is a warning. Like he's a canary in a coal mine. Pun intended. For Appalachia, but I don't know. What do you think about that? Did he seemed the Mothman? Do we think the Mothman is sympathetic to either like Eurasia or Asia or communism or something like that? Do you think the Mothman is like anti-American?
I don't know what the Mothman's all about, because I mean, like, can we take anything, because according to like all of Keel's contacts, Mothman was like an evil vampire that was like all about like blood and needed to be repelled by the cross.
He had those hypnotic red eyes. Is there some sublimated like anti-communist hysteria maybe happening with Mothman?
I don't know, like maybe. I mean, I guess in a way, like, there is just like, maybe it's a general kind of it might be good to talk about the paratrooper thing, because maybe it's like kind of like a Red Dawn like like paranoia that they're gonna like parachute down, like parachute in like a bunch of maybe on the back, riding on the backs of moths, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily. It would be interesting if like there was it would be interesting if there was like a massive UFO psyop like happening in Point Pleasant, and then like incidentally, like unrelatedly, like a Mothman like appeared, and like all these agencies were like, what the fuck, like what is Mothman?
Oh my God.
Like, what is this Mothman doing here? Like I mean, like I tend to think like that again. I certainly don't think that it was just that people were on LSD or like whatever, some bullshit
Definitely
like
not.
that. Like, I think that something was going on. I think that, if anything, I almost feel that UFOs are very nebulous things. Like, it's very, like, a UFO basically is an unidentified flying object. The Mothman is a little bit different. I mean, it was like a wildlife area, who knows, like, but the eyewitness accounts, they might be punched up a little bit, but I really do think those people saw something.
Yeah.
And like in terms of the MIBs, like you could take it in multiple different ways. Like I think the MIBs is a bit vaguer, especially once there's like a little bit of hubbub around this winged creature and stuff like that.
Exactly. Who can say the sincerity or the motives of anybody that descends on this small town?
Yeah.
Acting like there's somebody who knows something.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the same time, I guess if we should include here, or maybe before diving off like the liminal deep end or whatever, that there's like one other theory that was published in Soldier of Fortune magazine in 2014, and I wasn't able to find the actual article, but I guess it's a short one and it's pretty straight to the point. I don't know on what evidence they're basing kind of like their assertion, but basically the headline of the article is UFO mystery solved. Mothmen were actually Green Berets. And I guess the author, Harold Hutchinson, wrote that Special Operations Forces near Point Pleasant, West Virginia, were testing high-altitude, low-opening, halo parachuting for use in Vietnam. According to Hutchinson, the jumpers used luminous paint to be seen during the tests. Many of the tests of that procedure occurred near Point Pleasant. I guess this is a quote from the article. The jumpers used paint that temporarily glowed in the dark to keep track of personnel. What the Green Berets making those jumps hadn't figured on was the fact that people on the ground could see it as well. This included the amorous couple who made the report on the 15th of November 1966. The luminous paint worked so well in the tests, Special Forces troops used it in Southeast Asia. And I guess that is what they're saying, like, basically... that would explain like all the
does not explain it, because like Mothman like took off from the ground, which like paratroopers don't do.
Then you start to get like a little bit more into kind of like speculative, like were they testing out technology? I know there was some discussion of jetpacks, basically.
Okay.
Which I mean, and of course, like if you had like a parachute, kind of like maybe it got stuck in the trees or something.
Why would someone in your jetpack like chase a car at 100 miles an hour, squeaking like a mouse loudly, and then like
maybe it was like an Operation Wandering Soul kind of thing of like, we should test this on people, on civilians who have no idea what it is, And I guess so I think actually the archivist you mentioned, Doug Skinner, they Soldier of Fortune, maybe this blogger on cryptozoonews.com reached out to him. And I guess he said, I'm not convinced that every Mothman report can be chalked up to a paratrooper, but it's a plausible explanation for some, and certainly for some of the UFO reports. There was a lot going on in Point Pleasant that year. And I guess the November sightings, this author writes, the November sightings of Mothman hardly match a parachuting Green Beret. On November 1st, 1966, several National Guardsmen saw a Mothman described as a large, brown man-shaped figure on a limb of a tree near the armory on Camp Conley Road, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. On the 12th, 5 men digging at the cemetery near Clendenin, West Virginia, saw a flying brown human-shaped object. Then on the 15th, the first widely recorded sighting occurred when 2 couples in the TNT area near the old power plant outside Point Pleasant saw a large gray man-shaped bird-like creature with reflective blazing red eyes and 10-foot wingspan, and it pursued them at high speeds. And and they uploaded a patch from MACV-SOG, the Special Operations Group in Vietnam. And looking at that, it's basically, it looks kind of like a Wendigo or some kind of vampire beast with like dagger fangs for teeth and like blood dripping down it, and these like very demonic red eyes and like a little Green Beret cap.
Yeah, it's much more of like a humanoid vampire. I mean, it is like a sus creature, and there were like things like I remember there was like an op that happened like in the Philippines involving like an Aswang, which is kind of like a vampire type creature that like they were kind of afraid of. Actually, this might be we might go a little bit long, but this might be like a good time to bring this up, because I think that the vampire aspect of this is interesting, because there is some Mothman vampire overlap, which is already kind of dipped into. I'll just we could maybe go into this in greater detail later on, but there is just, if you Google Aswang psyop, what comes up is an Esquire article about how the CIA used the Aswang to win a war in the Philippines.
How do you spell that? OSWAN?
It's ASWANG.
Okay, how the CIA used Aswang to win a war. Wow.
Yes. Straying away from conventional search and destroy tactics, the CIA thought of an ingenious strategy to add folklore, specifically the Aswang, to its coterie of propaganda weaponry. This psychological warfare took place from 1950 to 1954 in the provinces of Pampanga, Nueva Ecija, and Tarlac. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but considering the rural nature of Philippine society in this epoch, belief in the Aswang was strong, along with other supernatural entities such as the Encanto and the Mananangal. We need Kate here, but given the superstitious nature of Filipinos, some will argue that believing in these creatures could continue to this day. Thus, the Aswang became the perfect candidate for the CIA to take advantage of. The plan was simple. A pile of dead bodies, usually deceased Hook fighters, would be left by the side of the road in a busy area in the province. And on those mangled bodies, holes were punctured to resemble animal or Aswang bites. The terrible sight convinced anyone who came across it this was the nighttime monsters of Filipino folklore that committed the atrocious act. And surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, the plan worked. Reports revealed that the townspeople who were once either indifferent or sympathetic to the Hook cause were undoubtedly terrified. The same pattern of holes, animal bites, and carcasses were seen across the countryside in quick succession. To the superstitious, the Hook battleground was a haunted place filled with ghosts and eerie creatures. In his memoir, Landsdale recounted how they would kidnap one Hook, puncture his neck with 2 holes, hang his body by the heels, drain him of blood, and dump the corpse on a trail that other Hooks would pass by. When the Hooks discover their dead comrade, they promptly pack up and relocate to a different hill.
Oh my god.
Yes.
And this is
this is crazy. Another tactic that Lansdale and his team used was the Eye of God, which would be painted on a wall facing the house expected Hook sympathizes in the dead of night. The mysterious presence of these malevolent eyes the next morning had a sharply sobering effect.
God. And this is Ed Lansdale, like, of Black Eagle, like Yamashita's Gold, like I think wasn't The Quiet American, the Graham Greene book, based on his life, like doing stuff in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. He was he's like a major player, and also, yeah, from everything, I think we read some quotes about him. I forget, maybe it was on the Lombardi episode. He was like a psycho. I guess, yeah, like literally a psycho, like just murdering people and making it look like they were killed by vampire, and Aswang.
Basically using cattle mutilation tactics. But yeah, this, like, the patch that was worn by this one group of Green Berets, Shell Burst US, Mac V, SOG Vietnam, the US.
Yeah, Mac V SOG, a special operations group.
Yeah, it is like literally like some kind of like hairy, bearded, skull type vampire thing. There's a great, like, related to this in this sort of cattle mutilation stuff, there is a great part of the Mothman Prophecies which goes into this. Like, we already talked a little bit about how, like, Mothman was, like, vampiric and had a certain penchant for blood, and you know, could possibly be repelled by crosses in the classic vampire fashion. But there's another part of the book where John Keel talks about like a whole incident with Mothman and some possible blood encounter. I think I opened the wrong thing here. I have so many Mothly tabs open at the moment.
I know. There's multiply.
You know, difficult to navigate. Is this what I'm looking for? Yeah, here we go. So he writes, yeah, among my grimmer memories of 66 to 67 are those times when I knelt in farm fields to examine dead animals, particularly dogs who had suffered amazingly clean and expert cuts. These deaths were not localized, but came in nationwide waves simultaneously with UFO waves, you know, classic cattle mutilation thing. This pattern has been repeated ever since. Prior to the October 1973 flying saucer flap, there was an epidemic of animal deaths throughout the Midwest from Minnesota to Mississippi, causing quite a stir in the local press. 2 points confounding investigators have been the absence of blood and footprints, the Kansas City Times reported. Even on warm days with the carcass freshly killed, there has been no bleeding on or around the animal. Some believe the cattle were drained of blood. No human tracks have been detected near each mutilation, even in fresh snow. But as in previous waves of animal mutilation disappearances, authorities tried to blame witchcraft cults, cattle rustlers, and dog nappers who sell the poor animals to hospitals for experimental purposes. But the total absence of evidence of any kind seems to rule out these conventional explanations. Europe has been plagued with phantom animal killers for generations. Sweden had a plague of this sort in 1972. The extensive vampire legends of Middle Europe were undoubtedly based on such incidents. Vampires were cloaked beings, often accompanied by strange aerial lights, who could paralyze humans and animals in their tracks. As recently as 20 years ago, there were a series of vampire killings in Yugoslavia. 4 bloodless human bodies were found with slashed throats in a field near Klek Mountain, according to one report. As I have noted, UFOs, hairy monsters, and Mothmen all appear to have the ability to ferret out human females during their menstrual period. I began to seriously wonder if blood and flesh were not vital ingredients in the mysterious transmogrification process. Did energies from the superspectrum need earthly biological materials to construct temporary entities? It does seem as if many UFO and monster sightings are staged as distractions, luring crowds of people to places like the TNT area, while animal mutilations and disappearances are taking place almost unnoted only a few miles away. Soon after the Mothman's first appearance in November 1966, police found the body of a dog in the TNT area. It was completely charred, and the surrounding area was unburned. I wondered if it might not have been sacrificed in some secret magical ritual by some unknown warlock. A ritual that brought Mothman into being. The UFO waves of the 1960s were accompanied by the occult explosion, the rapid spread of witchcraft and magical practices. An interesting side effect of the flying saucer phenomenon is that many of the people attracted to the subject, people with very materialistic and pseudoscientific outlooks, gradually drift into the study of psychic phenomena, abandoning the extraterrestrial theory along the way. In retrospect, flying saucers were partly responsible for the occult explosion. The most confusing feature of the phenomena is its use of allegorical situations and complicated diversions meant to cover up some of the more covert activity. Hairy monsters are seen carrying dead dogs. People assume other missing dogs provided dinner for the smelly apparition. Actually, the dogs might have served some other purpose altogether, a purpose that might turn our hair gray instantly if we knew the full details. In messages passed along to Italian contactee Eugenio Saragusa, the mischievous entities have tried to explain their volumetric logic and cosmic double talk. Dr. Jacques Vallée has called it metalogic, suggesting that the entities have a logic system quite different from ours, and when they try to translate things to our level, their statements come out absurd. He does not consider their need for deceit, which is based upon their urge to manipulate us through beliefs and what the British call acceptances. Once Woodrow Derenberger accepted Indrid Cold's existence and the existence of Lanulos, his view of reality, that's like the place where Indrid Cold was from, his view of reality can be manipulated to include those beings and places. In March 1967, an astonishing UFO attack took place in West Virginia, apparently supporting the vampiric theories I was entertaining at the time. While other UFO investigators had been collecting endless descriptions of things seen in the sky, I was out examining dead animals in a remote field, pondering the real meaning behind the bloodless carcasses. On the night of March 5th, a Red Cross bloodmobile was traveling along the Route 2, which runs parallel to the Ohio River. Bo Schertzer, 21, and a young nurse had been out all day collecting human blood, and now they were heading back to Huntington, West Virginia, with a van filled with fresh blood. The road was dark and cold, and there was very little traffic. As they moved along a particularly deserted stretch, there was a flash in the woods on a nearby hill, and a large white glow appeared. It rose slowly into the air and flew straight for their vehicle. "My God, what is it?" the nurse cried. "I'm not going to stick around to find out," Schertzer answered, pushing his foot down on the gas. The object effortlessly swooped over the van and stayed with it. Schertzer rolled down his window and looked up. He was horrified to see some kind of arm or extension being lowered from the luminous thing cruising only a few feet above the bloodmobile. "It's trying to get us," the nurse yelled, watching the other arm reach down on her side. It looked as if the flying object was trying to wrap a pincer-like device around the vehicle. Schertzer poured on the horses, but the object kept pace with them easily. Apparently they were saved by the sudden appearance of headlights from approaching traffic. As the other cars neared, the object retracted the arms and hastily flew off. Both young people rushed to the police in a state of hysteria. The incident was mentioned briefly on the radio newscast that night, but was not picked up by the newspapers. In cases like this, we have to ask, did the UFO really intend to carry off the bloodmobile? Or was it all a sham to quote-unquote prove the UFO's interest in blood? Later, I had to check to find out if any bloodmobiles actually vanished anywhere. The Red Cross thought I was a bit nuts.
Okay. Well.
So there you go. Blood.
They want blood. They want blood.
They want blood. Yeah.
Okay.
Another thing from the Mothman Prophecies that I thought was a little bit interesting was the little Pizzagate thing that John Keel pointed out.
Really?
He said, a little bit of Pizzagate vibes. He says, sometime in late October 1966, Mr. Leonard, quote, Shy Elmore, 72, Duncan Falls, Ohio, was taking a stroll around 4 a.m. when he encountered a strange building, which frightened him badly. Like many elderly people, Mr. Elmore does not sleep well and often takes long walks late at night. On this particular morning, he was walking along a road 2 blocks from his home when he saw a strange L-shaped building that looked like a galvanized iron shed sitting in the middle of a large field. Since he never noticed this quote-unquote shed before, he walked closer to take a better look. Something about it frightened him. Later, he could not explain why it had scared him, and he turned and started to hurry away. Although it was dark and he could see no windows or doors in the shed, he claims he distinctly heard a normal male voice come from it. "Don't run, the voice called. I didn't exactly run, Mr. Elmore told me, but I walked pretty fast. He hurried home and got his rifle and returned to the site. To his astonishment, the shed was gone. This incident upset him very much, and according to his wife, he was a nervous wreck for several days afterwards. I mean, so would I. Don't run. Anyway, he decided to call the sheriff and report what he'd seen. The sheriff promised to come out and take a look, but never did. Mr. Elmore told me his story in a direct manner without embellishments or wandering speculations. No men in black came around to bother Mr. Elmore. I was the first reporter to talk to him. When he showed me the field, I was perturbed to find that it was right next to the Duncan Falls Elementary School. An unusual number of sightings and Fortean events seem to be concentrated around schools, and the largest percentage of witnesses consists of children between the ages of 7 and 18. Another statistical oddity is that the majority of adults who claim their autos were pursued by UFOs or monsters are school teachers, especially teachers specializing in abnormal children, the very bright or the mentally deficient. This is why I was so interested in the West Virginia quote-unquote census takers, MIBs, who are mainly concerned with the numbers and ages of children living in the Ohio Valley.
Okay, get out of my... get off my porch, Child Protective Services. Interesting.
Anyway, it's very mothly indeed. Just a lot of stuff of that nature. A lot of interesting tidbits happening here in the Mothman universe.
Yeah, it could have been Green Berets with jetpacks and like reflective coats, and I don't know if they would have had infrared goggles that would look that jumped out at me immediately. At least nowadays, like with night vision goggles and stuff, like if you had like say your parachute got caught on a tree, or maybe you had a jetpack with like wings on it, like maybe that was just, or maybe it was just stylistic, so you look like a supervillain or something, and you're flying around and you got these like red eyeballs. And isn't there like a Marvel superhero like Captain America's sidekick who basically kind of looks like Mothman, but he's like a robot Mothman?
Does he look like Mothman? I don't know, maybe you mean the Falcon.
Might be the Falcon. It's like they have little red dot kind of eyes, on their helmet that kind of look like, unless I'm thinking of something else. But
I feel like I kind of know what you're talking about, but I don't. Little red dots in their helmet that are like eyes. I feel like I'm getting a vague idea of what you're talking about, but like, I don't know. I can't quite picture it. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there is something like that. There was a sighting of like a caped man. That like just randomly like appeared during this whole flap at one point. He was just like a guy wearing a cape. This guy, or I guess this woman, 2 days after Tiny, the pop-eyed missing heirs investigator, invaded Cape May, Mothman, the pop-eyed pterodactyl, visited Tiny's restaurant in Point Pleasant. At 5 p.m. on January 11, 1967, Mrs. Mabel McDaniel was walking near the drive-in restaurant when she saw an object soaring down Route 62. I thought it was an airplane, then I realized it was flying much too low, she said. She had been living with Mothman witnesses for 2 months, but never attempted to see the critter herself. Nor did she want to. Knowing she was psychologically prepared to, maybe even hallucinate a sighting, I interviewed her very carefully afterward. Her story held up. This was a real sighting. She froze in her tracks, scarcely believing her eyes. I thought I could see 2 legs, like men's legs, hanging down from it. It circled low over Tiny's, then flew off. She could not see any head or neck, the wings were motionless, and it was completely silent. In a way, it sounded almost like a hang glider, but hang gliding was almost a completely unknown sport in 1967. Mrs. McDaniel was nervous and excited afterwards, but suffered no ill effects. Gwendolyn Martino and her daughter returned from Europe in January and visited the Christensens a few days after Tiny rode off in his darkened Cadillac. At 3 a.m. on January 13, 1967, Gwen and Connie, who were sharing a room, were awakened by a loud sound seeming to come from directly overhead. The sounds were distant at first, like someone hammering on metal with a rubber mallet, or possibly walking over a metal surface. The noises grew steadily louder until they were deafening. The whole house seemed to shake, Gwen said. When she started to get up to investigate, the sound stopped instantly. As soon as she was back in bed, they began again. The 2 women debated whether they should wake up Ed Christensen, a heavy sleeper. Gwen started to get out of bed again, and then the noises stopped. Finally, they faded away. 2 evenings later, Mr. and Mrs. Christensen returned home to find their children in a very distraught state. They had heard the strange hammering sound again, followed by heavy footsteps crunching through the thick snow outside the house. Connie's 19-year-old boyfriend was present, and he had looked out the window in time to see a tall figure hurrying away from the house. It looked like he was wearing a long, white cape, and when it reached a 5-foot-high fence, it leaped effortlessly over it and disappeared into the other side. The next morning, Ed Christensen examined the area for footprints. He found a set of large human tracks embedded in the snow, leading to the fence and continuing on the other side. These footprints went on to another building some distance away and stopped abruptly at the wall of another structure. There were no footprints around the building, an old abandoned shed. The witnesses were puzzled as to where the person could have gone. Like our hairy monsters, little green Martians, and Mothman, the caped intruder had vanished into nothingness. Well,
Wow. Okay.
Capes.
Capes, exactly. Cape shit.
Yeah, it was
the original
literally
cape shit.
The original Cape shit. Yeah, that's kind of like a Spring Heel Jack type story. I mean, I think that one of the more compelling things is that the stuff goes back a ways. That is very similar to Spring Heel Jack's story. That's one of the ones that seems most like it could have been some kind of paratrooper or a guy with a jetpack or something. But stories like that is very, very similar to a Spring Heel Jack story, and that kind of stuff is all the way back in the Victorian period. People had these encounters. So I don't know if you could strictly say. I think there might be some aspect of that to it. It's possible. One thing that did jump out at me is that the MIBs were often reported to be wearing ripple-soled shoes, which I think paratroopers do wear, or were developed for paratrooper use, ripple-soled shoes.
Yeah,
but, I don't know what to make of that connection, but it's all pretty mothly.
It is incredibly mothly. And...
Yeah. we fully wrap up, I did catch one thing, just as a little aside. There's some good stuff also in what's it called? Messengers of Deception. But I almost think we should do a more thorough episode on that book. This one thing I did want to mention. There's a part in the book where he talks about paranoia within the government and things like that, and he makes this allusion to the idea that I think he says something about General MacArthur's interest in the phenomenon or in UFOs, and he said something that let me see if I can actually find this reference. I think I took the page down. It's on page 131. My note is General MacArthur warning of interplanetary war, because apparently that's what he did. This is what John Keel wrote. The U.S. government is being taken over by the space people. This rumor spread throughout the country in 1967, an updated version of the old devil theory. Actually got its start in 1941 when James V. Forrestal, the brilliant Secretary of Defense in the Truman cabinet, went bananas and raced through the corridors of the Pentagon screaming, "We're being invaded and we can't stop them!" He was convinced that his phones... You never heard about this guy? This is actually possibly a good episode.
Forrestal?
James V. Forrestal, yeah.
Actually, was he the one that had a mental breakdown?
Yeah, he ended up killing himself. Yeah.
That's right.
He was convinced his phone was being tapped and some enormous conspiracy was underway. Soon after he was placed in a hospital, he leaped out a window to his death. While the press blamed his paranoia and the tensions of the Cold War, the UFO enthusiasts knew better. Air Force intelligence had compiled a top-secret estimate of the situation following the UFO investigations in 1947 to 48. Their conclusion, according to the late Captain Edward Ruppelt, was that flying saucers were extraterrestrial. Forrestal, so the story went, was one of the few to read that report before Air Force Chief of Staff Hoyt Vandenberg ordered all copies destroyed. And it blew his mind. So I don't know about that, but he did say two other top military men, General George C. Marshall and General Douglas MacArthur, were obsessed with the flying saucer phenomenon. MacArthur made several public statements declaring that the next war would be fought against, quote, evil beings from outer space. A fabled think tank, the RAND Corporation, was assigned to feed UFO data into a computer and fight an imaginary war with those evil beings. Since we wouldn't know where they were from, what their technology was, or how to attack their bases, the computer advised us to surrender. So that part about the RAND Corporation, I couldn't find any proof of that was true.
Okay.
But I couldn't find anything really about George C. Marshall being upset, except for maybe some Majestic 12 documents.
Or you mean MacArthur, right? Yeah, MacArthur.
No, George C. Marshall I couldn't. But Douglas MacArthur, I did look up, and I found it was debunked on Snopes, but in a way where, once again, something where a very glaring, probably the most glaring example of this that I've encountered, even worse than Bill Gates's COVID war game didn't predict COVID. It says the General Douglas MacArthur predicted an interplanetary war. Again, using the word predict. The World War II icon alluded to the possibility that mankind might someday face an extraterrestrial foe. So, claim. During a 1955 speech at West Point, General Douglas MacArthur told assembled cadets the next war will be an interplanetary war. The nations of the Earth must someday make a common front against attack by people from other planets. Rating... false. Okay. So then in the body of the article, is what they actually have. They say, however, General MacArthur did not deliver a speech at West Point that year, nor is there any record of his specifically stating an opinion that the next war would be an interplanetary one. The confusion started with comments reportedly made by MacArthur when he was paid a private visit at his residence in New York's Waldorf Astoria Hotel by the mayor of Naples, Achille Lauro, in October 1955. The following day, Mayor Lauro relayed the gist of their 45-minute conversation to the press, maintaining MacArthur expressed the belief that someday, the people of Earth, perhaps as far as 1,000 years in the future, the people of Earth might find themselves facing an extraterrestrial confrontation. General MacArthur described himself, this is the quote from the article that they're referring to. General MacArthur described himself as a confirmed optimist regarding the possibility of another world war, Mayor Lauro said. He thinks another war would be double suicide, and there is enough sense on both sides of the Iron Curtain to avoid it, the mayor went on. He believes that because of the developments of science, all the countries on Earth will have to unite to survive and to make a common front against attack by people from other planets. The politics of the future will be cosmic or interplanetary, in General MacArthur's opinion, the mayor continued. He quoted the military leader as saying that 1,000 years from now, today's civilization would appear as obsolete as the Stone Age. So, for one, they, Snopes completely, misinterpreted that. That statement about the civilization being obsolete, 1,000 years from now, has nothing to do with the idea of the interplanetary war. And the substance of what he said, according to this guy, is exactly
he pretty much said that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like, of course, yeah, but because he didn't literally say it in front of, like, an audience of West Point cadets, like, and at high noon.
It literally gets worse, because several years later, on May 12, 1962, so it's literally about the date, MacArthur delivered a speech to the cadets at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point on the occasion of receiving the Sylvanus Thayer Award, during which he once again alludes to the possibility that mankind might someday face an extraterrestrial foe. All these remarks, like, are actually kind of crazy, like, on their own. So he says, "We deal now not with things of this world alone, but with," this is like more insane than the alleged quote that, like, I guess is debunked. "We deal now not with things of this world alone, but with the illimitable distances, as yet unfathomed mysteries of the universe. We are reaching out for a new and boundless frontier. We speak in strange terms of harnessing the cosmic energy, of making winds and tides work for us, of creating unheard of synthetic materials to supplement or even replace our old standard basics, to purify seawater for our drink, of mining ocean floors for new fields of wealth and food, of disease preventatives to expand life into the hundreds of years, of controlling the weather for a more equitable distribution of heat and cold, of rain and shine, of spaceships to the moon, of the primary target in war no longer limited to the armed forces of an enemy, but instead to include his civil populations." First of all, like, I love how this, just before we even get to the UFO stuff, which does come after this, like, I love how there's, like, this, like, you know, beautiful romantic, like, fantasy about, like, how no more hunger, you know, like,
and
we'll no
more civilian military distinction.
Like, and then we'll be able to just blast civilians at will. But anyway, so then he does immediately say after that, "Ultimate conflict between a united human race and the sinister forces of some other planetary galaxy. Of such dreams and fantasies as to make life the most exciting of all times." So, this is their conclusion. So General Douglas MacArthur did suggest the notion of eventual interplanetary war on at least a couple of occasions. One of them was in 1955, and one of them was during a speech in West Point. But, like, not both. Rating false.
Oh,
like,
wow.
And the thing is, like, do they not have, like, they used to at one point, I believe, have ratings that were, like,
a gradation,
true.
Somewhat true, kind of true. No,
like,
you either get 5 Pinocchios or 0 Pinocchios. That's it now.
So, like,
wow,
that's the
I got
worst
Pinocchio
Snopes
hard,
thing
but I assumed
seen.
that they wouldn't literally be like, yeah, he did give a speech about alien civilizations at West Point, but, like, on this technicality,
literally, it was like he said it in 1955 and he said it at West Point, but not like at both at the same time. That was like their thing.
So
like
the substance of the fact that, like, did
this enormous red X, like, false.
Oh my god!
Like, you know,
wow, it's amazing.
Yeah. But anyway, so.
But that's interesting. That's something to, like, you know.
File that one away under X, I guess. But yeah.
I mean, I guess Ronald Reagan pretty much just, like, you know, plagiarized him 30 years later.
Yeah, pretty much. Or, I guess the psyop goes on, you know. It's the same thing. Like, like, where are they getting this idea from? Like, why are they so obsessed with it? Like, you know, I guess, like, it is in movies, but I think it was in their minds before. Like, it was in someone's mind before it was in movies, obviously. I guess there's a Day the Earth Stood Still and stuff like that, you know. But
that was a big deal. That was a big deal.
Yeah,
it's one of my dad's favorite movies. It really, I guess it psyoped him real good when he was a kid.
Definitely, it psyoped everybody. That's still, like, you know, really standard idea about, like, how UFOs are going to be, like, or how aliens are. They're going to come down and they're going to be like, you know, please stop, like, for peace. Like, if you watch The Outer Limits, we mentioned my sort of embryonic, not fully developed theory that The Outer Limits itself is a giant psyop. You know, but in The Outer Limits, it's always, like, or not always, but a lot of the time it's to do with that. The aliens are like, please, peace, like the big, like weird, like, you know, makeup alien, like, you know, it's like, you must learn peace, like, before, like, dying because, like, humans didn't understand or something, you know.
But every time they really beat that drum hard.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, right.
And now they're just, like, they're sicko threats that, like, need to be, like, eliminated. Pretty much.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on who you.
What side you're on.
Are you on the CE5 side or are you on the, you know, they're shutting down our missiles, like, you know, side.
No, they're repelling the advancement of, like, U.S. imperialist, you know, war columns, like, in the DMZ. There was a certain thing, I almost did get this, like, idea of, like, you know, when that orb showed up and just started, like, advancing on them, that it was, like, it, like, emerged from behind, what's it called? Mount Pikedew? Mm-hmm. You know, the mythical mountain.
Right.
Of the Korean people. And like it was, you know, almost like that icon of like Kim Il Sung smiling was just like everywhere, from everywhere you look at Team, he is following you, and just like they couldn't deny like the energy of the cosmic Juche energy that repelled them. So I want to know what's going on with there too. Why what UFO is this? I always thought they kind of didn't get involved in wars except to turn everybody's missiles off, but they were kind of like picking sides, allegedly.
Yeah.
Unless the Soviets really did have like secret Nazi weapons they were experimenting with, in which case. But I think that those people were right. Like we would have known about it. They probably wouldn't. They have, you know. Would both superpowers like hide this technology during the entire Cold War and not like, you know, build on it and like make it public at a certain point? Like Gorbachev could have just been like, actually America has like 0-point energy and they've been lying to you about it, and then like, you know, history would have been totally different. Or like, you know, they're hiding aliens, like, you know, they could have, you know, done something like that.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know, maybe there is like some kind of maybe there's a little bit of class solidarity between these people. Maybe they realize, you know, like despite their ideals, you know, both like countries kind of have ideals about like freedom of information or whatever, like, or, you know, uplifting like the common people or something like that, but they don't necessarily always abide by that, like, you know, so
yeah, it's hard
it's possible. I mean, I don't know if I don't know if I would indict Gorby himself.
I think it could have been anybody. It could have been Brezhnev, you know, it could have been anyone. Basically, you know, just pulling that card. But also the same thing
as that
about
guy
like
said, like, you know, if there's 50 people involved, like that's if it requires 50 people, like you can't keep it under wraps, you know?
Yeah, no, conspiracies over 50 people don't exist categorically. Never happened.
Yeah, 51 people have never conspired on anything. It is not possible. It is not humanly possible for 51 people to keep anything secret.
Nobody ever conspires as a class to like further their collective interests. It's never ever happened. With 51 or 53 people, literally impossible. But no, obviously. Also, that does make me think about the moon landing, which I hope we'll get to one day. And that is a compelling counter argument for why the moon landing is not fake. Because why would the Soviet Union go along with it the entire time? And even like to this day, like why would they keep that secret? You know, if they just cheated to quote unquote win the space race, like they didn't really win the space race,
you think that
like on points.
Well,
but
you feel like the Soviet Union would know that they cheated, and would not, like, you know, they'd have intel that they hadn't cheated.
I mean, I guess that would be perhaps like that. I guess I'm operating under that assumption.
Obviously, they would, you know, like do everything.
Want to make it look like
actually cheat, yeah, because otherwise it wouldn't be cheating. It would be, well, they would, I guess. If they like, part of cheating would have to be concealing it, you know,
concealing
like,
it, as
you could, you
have to hide the steal. So, but I wonder, like, to what extent, like, how well the Soviets were able to like monitor the progress of that mission, and if they were in a position to be able to determine whether or not it was real.
Yeah, well, they never really put people on the moon, did they? They wanted to.
No, I feel like they might have put the first unmanned probe on the moon. Mm-hmm. Or maybe that was Mars and Venus, where they did the first probes there as well. But yeah, they never landed a person on the moon, which also strikes me as a little bit odd. Like, they did have a moon landing program for a while, but they won so many other aspects of the firsts in the space race. You know, first, you know, dog in space, first man in space, first orbit, first woman in space, like first, I think first maybe orbit of the moon or something like that with like a satellite and all those things. And at the very end, the U.S. just comes out of nowhere and does like the most difficult one when they weren't able to beat you in like every other category. It's a little bit like, what's that all about? But then if the Soviets, I mean, I assume they would want to like look into it if they had any kind of inkling that it was fake. They would want to know, like, for sure. And the fact that they didn't would seem to lend credence to the fact that, okay, I guess they actually did it, but then maybe one can't be so sure. Like, maybe if there was another reason, that would be very fascinating, where they just... Also, I mean, the same thing with, like, the Kennedy assassination and all the assassinations. I think at one point, like, Khrushchev did say, like, he published articles that were like, this is a conspiracy, like, the right-wing of the political power structure and like a bunch of billionaires in the CIA and anti-Castro Cubans all like, I don't know exactly how they did it, but they definitely did it, and they were trying to like blame him as Oswald as a Marxist, to blame it on us, which is bullshit. So he did kind of clap back a little bit with that, but then I don't know, he was out of power a year later, and then I guess I don't know, like maybe that was just a common thing like Soviets talked about, was like, well, obviously like the capitalists like, you know, murdered all their leaders and like it sucks and stuff, but I don't know, I feel like that if you're gonna psyop, you know, the Americans and like, you know, undercut like Reaganism, like, man, you really should have amped up the conspiracy theory, you know, like hit that conspiracy spread disinformatia button, but it's really actually spreading informatia button in Crisis in the Kremlin, you know, and just keep mashing that button every turn.
Yeah, there is. I read these two things. I read Messengers of Deception. I mean, there's a lot in between these two books. You know, there's a lot to cover even in the Mothman Prophecies. So it might have been like over ambitious to you know, think we would get to a lot of Messengers of Deception by Jacques Vallée in this episode, especially since it's not directly moth related really, and more just like UFO stuff. But you know, there's a lot of good stuff in there, and there is one other I think that it. Well, because I read them back to back, I'm not sure. Maybe it was in the Mothman Prophecies, but one of them like really emphasized that like Sputnik like shattered. Actually, you know what? I think that it was in the outline for John Keel and Ivan Sanderson's like failed book project together. You know, so I'm not sure, but it was like Sputnik destroyed like traditional religious belief. Like it was no longer possible to like believe in like, you know, a god or anything like that. You know, once Sputnik happened.
Wait, so like, they literally felt like that, like Soviet meme poster of like the astronaut flying around saying "Bush and yet." Like they actually felt that. It was like,
that
no.
was true. Yeah, they were like, God damn it! Like it's true. It's true. It's true.
There were no angels up there. There's no firmament. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh wow. I guess it did. They always do talk about like the existential terror that like the American kind of like scientific and political establishment felt when Sputnik happened, of like, oh my god, like those barbaric like commie Russians, like how did they do this? Like this
they've penetrated heaven. There's
they penetrated heaven. They sexually assaulted heaven.
It was violated, but yeah, of course, we now know that that is just, you know, space. It's a lower sphere. It's not really the heavens. And the stars are still lamps that are repelling the bad jinn, and keeping them in check.
Well, we'll need it because
safe. Yeah.
I mean, it almost goes without saying that Mothman obviously could have been a jinn.
Yeah, he definitely could have been a jinn. That's definitely true. He kind of actually. There is, well, hold on. Maybe this. I actually did just find this. There's there's a whole historical thing that he and Ivan Sanderson have, Keel and Ivan Sanderson, and there's it's sort of their book is chronologically ordered, and chapter 10 is called "The Shock, A.D. 1958 to 1962." The first Sputnik debunks half the believers. Science goes slightly balmy, and the technicians roar. Pseudoscience and psychologists get in the act. Man's whole outlook was changed by the first Sputnik. Moon watches bring a rash of UA reports. Orthodoxy gets vicious. The press bows out. So basically, I think there might have been some other thing later, but they basically were saying that it was the absolute crisis. Like when Sputnik happened, it was. I think that at one point they really did say traditional religion was no longer possible, in those terms. But it's
kind of a funny belief that in retrospect that that's what did it, just getting a person into
John
space.
Keel did say at one point I have always been an atheist, so I feel like he didn't have much stake in it either.
Okay.
So,
if anything, maybe there's a part of him. Of course, he probably couldn't admit it because you're not allowed to cheer for the Soviet triumph in science. But there's a part of him that was if there's anything that, I don't know, edgy American atheists, would love about the Soviet Union, it's when they're being edgy atheists that. Well, it's at least they're going to debunk God.
About the Soviet Union, because but of course really you would be an anarchist Like, because you get everything without, anything actually ever being achieved. I know Spanish Civil War. It's for 3 days. There was anarchy or whatever. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but,
whereas in reality, really, the poor treatment of religion is literally the only bad thing about the Soviet Union. Everything else is great. Everything else is wonderful. It was on the right track, So only. But I mean, maybe a couple.
Yeah, well, maybe not the only thing ever that was bad.
Maybe a couple other things, but
definitely stands out.
No, there's things to critique, but yeah, it is kind of funny that like that. And that's the thing that kind of hasn't borne itself out, even in this like great secular age of like crass materialism or whatever, and scientism is like the long march of atheism through all of the institutions. Nope, we're talking about Mothman. So yeah, I'd say that atheism is not the ideological victory is not won for atheism.
It definitely is not one. Yeah, there are a lot of like skeptical inquirer, like it was a Sandhill Crane article out there, and they are not compelling. And everyone like I mean, there's everyone wants that we want to believe in Mothman, for whatever reason. Like, I'm gonna err on the side of Jin for 2 reasons. For maybe ancillarily, maybe not for 2 reasons. Maybe for one sort of reason. Partially for Snopes saying that the General MacArthur thing was false, taking issue
really
with that, a little bit making me think there's something to it, and also a Matt Christman trying to shitcode it with like some vague LSD theory is also making me think that Mothman is a real Jinn and he's out there. And,
like it was just a bit by the CIA or something,
Yeah, actually, it's really funny. Because, John... Well, I don't know if he invented it, but he pioneered the LOL, I'm CIA thing. Because, in all of his letters, he's always making jokes about how, I mean, after all, I am a CIA extraterrestrial,
wow.
And stuff.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Interesting. He definitely pioneered the LOL CIA thing. I mean, apparently the UFO community, as you would imagine... is very much like tanky Twitter, where everyone is always accusing each other of being a cop, or an alien, a cop, or alien, fed, or all 3.
Exactly.
So that he definitely was on the LOL I'm CIA tip.
Interesting. All the Men in Black and the MIBs are basically LOL I'm CIA, except in some cases there's no LOL part. It's just I'm CIA. But you can't trust anything.
Yeah, there is one thing, just relative to what you were saying. This is one messenger's deception thing that is back in the Major Murphy stuff that I think is interesting. So, Major Murphy says to Jacques Vallée, you need to face all the possibilities. You have to draw the consequences. Someone may have solved the problem, that is the UFO problem. Perhaps there is an elegant solution to multidimensional travel, and it is being applied. I am not a physicist. You should ask your theoretician friends what they think. I can only tell you that silent, disc-tape flying machines can be built. If they are equipped with the right devices, they can create astonishing effects and be reported as flying saucers. I wish I still had my files on the German experiments. Suppositions, I thought. Assumptions. We're going to need more than that to explain the UFO problem. Major, I can't believe that some Nazi group had managed to survive secretly with this kind of technology and its power. Who says anything about the Nazis? I am suggesting that other groups have become involved. Germany was simply a little ahead of other people. You have V-2s in 1944, you have the Atlas rocket in the 60s, you have Foo Fighters in 43, and the Green Fireballs of New Mexico 9 years later. A lot of people got involved. Industrial concerns, laboratories engaged in psychotronic research. The Nazi research on microwaves was child's play compared to the sophistication of modern experiments. If someone was using this technology, we can assume they have also mastered pharmacology, the use of drugs to distort the memories of witnesses, the use of mind control to suggest stories or to plant fake observations. Don't you think people should try to get some information about that before believing in friendly space visitors? It's hard to believe that these techniques, this is what Jacques Vallée says, it's hard to believe these techniques would already be applied in this kind of scale, I said. Don't you read the newspapers? Don't you follow publications on mind control? The military has been using this kind of technique for years. He pulled out a file series of New York Times clippings beginning in 1977. It described part of a U.S. project which spanned 35 years and involved hypnosis, narcoanalysis, electronic brain stimulation, and the behavioral effects of every physical vibration known to science, from ultrasound to microwaves. He showed me a book entitled Operation Mind Control, in which W.H. Bauer describes his meeting with a young man who had just returned from a tour of duty with the Air Force. He suffered from amnesia. Like many UFO contactees, he remembered vaguely that he had had a good time, but couldn't describe in detail where he had been. After many therapy sessions, he began to recall part of his activities. He had served, it seemed, on a military committee in Vietnam. He had dreams in which he was standing at a long table on a beach, with communist officers on one side and Americans on the other. Although the discussion was heated, nothing was written down. His assignment was to remember everything that was said. He had been trained for total recall, then his entire memory of his assignments was erased like a magnetic cassette.
Wow. Wow, I do remember reading that in Operation Mind Control. Yeah, and that goes back to we really should.
Maybe they were talking about how to collaborate on the UFO issue.
Oh my God,
that was the heated discussion.
There were a lot.
They were discussing the Mothman problem, and that's why they're getting so fired up. Let's do something about these moths. Someone saw a ghost in their bedroom. But yeah, like
but you know, there are going back to George Estabrooks, the psychologist who was a hypnosis expert in World War II. He claimed he could do that to people by the late 40s. At the latest, probably during World War II is when he started to pioneer this idea of like hypnotizing somebody, embedding classified information, and then kind of erasing it, and then bringing them out of a hypnotic trance, and they have no memory of what they did. So even if you torture them, whatever, you basically they wouldn't be able to divulge any information. So that's been floating around for a while. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Lots to dive deeper into, but we could leave it there for now. Can't say as long as there's disasters in this world, there may be Mothmen to warn us.
This is one last very good Jacques Vallée tidbit. I guess he, but again, I think we should spend some more time with this book. But one good
I agree.
He was interested in this group, the Order of Melchizedek. I think he actually talks about Urantia in this book a little bit. And he was very into this Order of Melchizedek or Melchizedek group. He took a cab, and he experienced a strange synchronicity where his cab driver's last name was Melchizedek. And he looked it up in the phone book, and there was only one person with that name, in the whole city. And he was like, wow, is this weird synchronicity? And he concluded, he suggested that if there is no time dimension as we usually assume there is, we may be traversing events by association. Modern computers retrieve information associatively. You evoke the desired records by using keywords, words of power. You request the intersection of microwave and headache, and you find 20 articles you never suspected existed. Perhaps I had unconsciously posted a request in some psychic bulletin board with the word Melchizedek. If we live in the associative universe of the software scientists, rather than the sequential universe of the space-time physicists, then miracles are no longer irrational events. The philosophy we could derive would be closer to Islamic occasionalism than to the Cartesian or Newtonian universe. And a new theory, that's king shit. I know he's spooked up, he's got problems, but good take.
I don't know about this, but like Islamic occasionalism ep when?
I would love to do that. That's
I'm
a super, that's basically like Ibn Arabi,
okay.
It's like kind of like the idea that like when you light a match, like the idea there's like no secondary causality, kind of like it's God only has certain habits, so nothing and everything that happens, like there's no like natural laws per se. There's just
hard
habits.
Laws of physics or things like
exactly.
That.
It's just like what God's habits are. So like if you strike a match and you like light a piece of paper on fire, like the paper burns because God like is deciding to have the paper burn. Like the fire isn't the cause because there's no secondary causality. That's why everything is made up of these units of time. But we can do a better rundown of it later on. But he says such a theory might have interesting things to say about communications with the denizens of other physical realities. I agree. And in conclusion, Mothman is a djinn.
End quote.
Winged djinn. End quote.
I think. There we go, folks. I think about as well as we can diagnose it.
Watch out for the flutter of wings. Beware.
Look him in the eye.
Yeah, watch the skies.
Keep your eyes fixed on the skies.
No.
More than ever, and don't look into his hypnotic eyes, because he's either a djinn or a green beret who's probably a psychopathically programmed to kill maniac who's going to shoot up a bowling alley. So be careful.
Yeah, we're gonna do Dogmen, in the near future. We're gonna do Dogmen. I think Dogmen's moment is coming. That's another thing about Dogmen, is that at least on Dogman Encounters Radio, all the eyewitnesses are always saying, do not look Dogman in the eye. It will traumatize you. It will haunt your dreams. You'll never forget it. That's the worst mistake you can make. Well, there's two. Yeah, the two worst mistakes you can make is shooting Dogman, because that will just make him angry, and looking him in the eye, because that will haunt your nightmares and destroy your life.
Oof. All right. Be careful out there in the woods, y'all.
Yeah, definitely be careful in the woods, especially Appalachia, anywhere around there. But I guess Long Island too. So you're never safe. You're never safe. Mothman's visit to Long Island is still anticipated.
Or Russia, or China, or pretty much anywhere.
Wherever
He's everywhere.
there are disasters, wherever,
or downtown Manhattan.
We can definitely expect to see him hovering over Hillary's gallows when she finally. There's gonna be a photo of Bill Clinton being executed by firing squad. There's gonna be this strange motley figure in the background, looking over.
Photo bombing. Yeah. All right. Well.
Yeah.
Something to look forward to in 2021.
Yeah, something to look forward to. Yeah. Any day now. Right. The transmissions will be disrupted when false President Joe Biden is gonna be lighting up the Christmas tree. All the lights are gonna go off at that very moment, and transmissions will all be interrupted.
He will know then it was a mistake.
Yeah,
to test the Mothman.
Yeah, it's definitely a mistake. Yeah, I wouldn't provoke him. Yeah,
it will be a severe punishment for the U.S. imperialists who violated the sovereignty of his astral plane.
Yeah, if some random dude with a monotone voice comes to your door and flashes a vague badge that has a bunch of scribble scrabble on it, it doesn't seem to be associated with any known agency. Probably best to try to turn that guy away and not have an interview with him, but
don't let them inside. Be safe.
Don't,
and
probably an abandoned TNT area, not the best place to hang out, to, with your girlfriend or whatever, or shoot arrows or what, probably
whatever
sounds a little bit dangerous, but whatever. Live your life,
live your life
if that's what you want to do, but don't come crying to me when you get chased at 100 miles an hour by a screeching djinn. All right.
So until next time, dear listeners, keep your eyes fixed on the sky, stay vigilant.
Peace.